Hey everybody, Kathleen Kennedy here from Lucasfilm, and I just wanted to drop in the holiday season and give a shout out to the Two Boys podcast, my favorite podcast that I listen in the car on my way to work at the Lucasfilm building where we make Star Wars movies, and they told me to tell you that the Two Boys have a shirt. If you search on tpublic.com, PIZZWIZZLER, Piz Whizzler, there is a Two Boys podcast shirt available, and it makes a great Christmas gift. I'm getting one for Ryan. Anyway, see The Rose of Skywalker coming out in December 25th? 20th? I don't know. They never tell me anything anymore. Anyway, Merry Christmas.
Hello and welcome to Talking Bird Presents Two Dudes Talk About. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host, Sean Judy. Hello, Sean Judy.
Hello there.
I had like a whole thing, and now it's like every time the rhythm of the opening stays. I was gonna do something like the McLaughlin Group. I was gonna be
Mandalorian, good TV?
Good
Debate.
Mandalorian or Pandalorian? Debate, Sean Judy. What do you think?
Pando.
Cokie Roberts. Pat Buchanan.
Fat Buchanan.
Fat Buchanan. You're like Jabba the Hutt. So I guess
most of our viewers won't even know what that is.
Yeah. Like, hey, you never know. But we're gonna talk. So the Star Wars podcast that no longer became a Star Wars podcast became we could talk about whatever we want. Well, I guess we want to talk about Star Wars because 2 shows in a row we're back talking. But
it's that time of year.
It's that time. It is. It is that weird thing where it's. I guess they are releasing the movie at Christmas. I was like, even though they don't release the movies at Christmas, there's one coming out in 11 days. Dummy. Yeah. Myself, the dummy. It's Star Wars time, Christmas time. It does have a weird kind of, even before the Disney acquisition of Star Wars. Maybe it's because that's when kids of our generation actually got the Star Wars booty. It was like, we didn't get it like whenever they're like, oh, Wave 2's out. We better get down to the store with our child-sized credit cards and let's leverage our future to our past. But no, it was Christmas and birthdays. That's when kids got, not like now where kids get everything handed to them, man.
Wow, it's early in the show to be that salty, bro.
I'm not that salty.
Of course, our salt mates out there will love that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for people that do listen to the show, and I thank you. Well, actually, maybe I should start for people that don't listen to the show. If you don't listen to the show, if this is your first time stumbling across us, what this is it's literally the name of the show, Two Dudes. It's just 2 guys in a basement. We pick our topic of our toy box of topics that we like to talk about, and
brew a pot of coffee and get after it.
Exactly. It's it's unscripted. It's actually, at least for me, it's very unnotey. I don't have a lot of notes. I used to be better about it, but I'm not a note taker. I'm not an outline guy. I do take notes, but I'm not an outline guy. John was the outline guy, and so we never discussed that role. Are you an outline guy? Not really.
I can be. If I have to be. I do.
Were you ever the dungeon master back in the?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. See, I guess that's a personality trait. It's like the organizational thing that I just do not have.
When you're president of the Meeker Middle School Dungeons and Dragons Club, sometimes you have to be DM. Okay.
Boy, I tell you, I'm bummed I never got to do that stuff. Apparently, I'm not alone. I was listening to a podcast years ago that I don't even think it exists anymore, and this guy they were talking about D&D, and one guy kind of said like, yeah, I wanted to do all that, but no one wanted to play. And I was like,
I was lucky.
I feel your pain. It's like the guys that played D&D. It's like I actually never played D&D. I was more of a Star Frontiers guy, so I had the Star Frontiers kit. Nobody wanted to play Star Frontiers, which was the sci-fi version, because I didn't really like fantasy. Mm-hmm. If I had a choice between spaceships and dragons, I always pick spaceships.
We used to do Traveler as well. Which is same thing.
Yeah, but I used to buy Dragon magazine and stuff and read all that, but it's like, I don't know. I do feel like in some ways I dodged a bullet, because later on as I got out of high school and I found friends that did play, and I'd already kind of moved on, like my window had closed, and then I'd see how like they get like like the tears well up in their eyes when their character would get killed, and I'd be like,
"You're emotionally attached to a piece of paper. Enjoy that,
guys. I don't think that's whatever. I mean, I don't like to knock people's hobbies. I mean, it's kind of like, I guess you could scale it to Star Wars." About like, I never thought I saw a grown man get upset about his hero dying on a rock but whatever.
That man was me.
It was me too.
But
true. Yes, it is Christmas season. It's we are 11 days from this recording time of the release, The Rise of Skywalker. We'll probably be able to talk a little bit about that near the end, but generally I think what we had decided that we were going to talk about is for people out there, if you haven't got on it, there are ways of getting it cheap. Disney Plus, the Mandalorian, I guess produced for Disney Plus.
Exclusively, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I will say, we're not a deal podcast, but I will say if you are a Verizon customer, that I'm not endorsing Verizon. They're kind of a weird organization. But if you have like unlimited data through Verizon, you are entitled to a free year of Disney Plus. So go out and look for that.
That is correct.
Because it's, at this point, I'm definitely, we'll get into the Mandalorian. I'm enjoying the content on Disney Plus, but I don't know if I had to pay for it myself, I don't know if I would do it monthly.
I think that, I'm paying for it, whatever. But I got in on the early deal, so I saved a little bit of money doing that. But I think that based on what they're talking about and the things that are in production and the various shows for all the properties that they have, Star Wars and Marvel and other things like that, the more movies that are going straight to their service. Like I know they did a Lady and the Tramp live action thing that was kind of straight to that. So they're hitting all of their properties and all of their demographics and whatnot with original content. So I think by the time the year free trial is over, there's going to be a lot more stuff on there that will be enticing to people that might keep them on board and paying. Also, a lot of the stuff that's currently out on the other streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and other things, Amazon Prime and all that, those things are going to start being reeled back in behind the paywall. It's not all the Star Wars movies are on the Disney Plus yet.
Yeah, Last Jedi is not.
Right,
currently.
It's still on Netflix. And so when those contracts start to expire, those things will start to be pulled behind the paywall, and you'll start seeing a more robust catalog. But I'm thinking that probably at the end of the big free trial, everybody's going to be. You start seeing those things popping up more and more. More original content is going to be uploaded, and I think that it'll probably keep a lot of those people on board. So, but then you'll also probably have somebody else's code. You can just steal it.
Yeah. I know that
not that we endorse that here on the Two Dudes,
or go on to a torrent site and get the episodes of the show. But yeah, I mean the big surprise was that they basically are out of the gate offered up whatever available Star Wars films that are on there in 4K resolution, which was kind of, I don't know how many people have upgraded to 4K, and then there's the idea of like, okay, so you have a 4K TV, but do you have a 4K streaming device going into that TV? Are you using a high-speed cable to be able to decode that? And I have all those because I'm a stickler for that, but then it's like,
does it look better?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, to be honest, it's kind of like, well, A New Hope, I thought it looked pretty damn good on the Blu-ray, and now I'm like, I don't know if I see much more resolution, and again, they've changed things.
Yes.
The Han and Greedo scene is like done again, and I'm just like, oh, it's kind of makes me realize I have these on Blu-ray. I bought them on iTunes because I thought it's like I don't even want to have to go get the disc.
Right.
So I'm kind of I've already. And the weird thing about that is they've gone in and now those files have been changed. So now initially you go into Disney 4K and you watch. And one of the great things they did add the 20th Century Fox logo back to the.
That is cool, and the fanfare as well.
Yeah.
And that to me. Just to take a quick step off, for me as a child, when those movies, when the first Star Wars movie came out, the 20th Century Fox fanfare to me was Star Wars soundtrack, right? That fanfare to begin with, I knew Star Wars was on, and then I used to get mad when I was a kid, when somebody would, on TV or we'd rent a movie or whatever, and the fanfare would come up and the whole Fox logo, and I'd be like, "We're watching Star Wars. It's going to be awesome." And you're like, "What is this?"
It's Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, you're like, "What is this shit?" Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So to have that restored back to the films to me was just fantastic.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. The problem is that I'm very much like you. That sound kind of triggers, and the original, especially the original Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a symphony because it's. Again, I didn't have a copy growing up, so it wasn't like a thing where I watched it daily or weekly. It was, like I said, birthdays or special occasions, you rent the VCR. I've told the story before.
Uh-huh.
But it became over time, and I realized this when the special editions came out. I never really thought about it until I was sitting out. I think it was at Lewis and Clark or the Cinerama, one of these great theaters, and they're getting ready to show the special edition. And before they're playing the soundtrack, because they think they just remastered them or something, and they had the music that's kind of the build up before the destruction of Alderaan.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody like 3 rows up did the sound of the like that low harmonic oscillator when they start to turn on the Death Star, and he's like,
Oh, okay. Right.
And he did it at the exact beat it does in the soundtrack. And I realized, I'm not the only person that this becomes like the sound of it's. I think that I don't even know if this is a proper term. It's like called psychoacoustics. It's almost like when 2 or 3 instruments or sound effects come together, and it's almost like they create a chord.
Okay.
A lot of groups, it's like when you listen to a record and you're like, "Oh, I love that saxophone part on this," and they're like, "It's not really a saxophone. That's a guitar going backwards with a keyboard."
Oh, geez, okay.
But somehow those things come together and it tricks your brain. It's like it's really something that late 20th century, say when studios became much more about reproducing live music and multi-tracks, like the Beatles, blah, blah, blah. So the psychoacoustics of A New Hope with Ben Burt, it was like such a piece. And I feel like, to beat a dead horse, every subsequent release of this movie, more and more do they upset the rhythm of this thing where it's like, again, you can do whatever you want, Lucasfilm. Just give us one good, high-resolution, clean copy, very as close as possible as you could get it to the 1977, 1980, 1983 releases, and then I'll never complain about it ever again. You could change background characters to suit the times or whatever, as long as I can go back and say, well, this is what it was like when it first came out.
Right. And again, I don't know if we've talked around and about this a lot, but the Lucasfilm / Disney is losing out on a lot of revenue and a lot of goodwill with the fan base by not releasing the original version, like you say, in the most clean and updated, with cleaning up all the artifacts and whatever and tightening it up, but the original release. And they've come close to it, but it's not clean, and it's actually really kind of crappy, and they kind of did it to poke the fans in the eye. But look at what Ridley Scott did with Blade Runner, right? And he put out the suitcase that had like the 25 different versions of it, and we kind of talked about this in our Blade Runner podcast. But it's like, the fact is that he embraced the fact that, well, at the end, he embraced the fact that there's all these different cuts and all these different versions, and they all do a different thing for the fan base, and there's different devotees to the different versions. And the same thing is true with Star Wars. And you could make a shit ton of money off of guys like us putting out the original movie that we saw when we were kids, and we'll buy the hell out of it individually. And if you put out another box set with all 9 movies and documentaries and a bunch of bullshit and cartoons and crap, and it was like $300, but that was the only way you were going to get that copy, we would all be out there with our money, waving it around, saying, "When does it come out? When does it come out?" Okay, because that's what we want. And anyway. But Disney makes strange decisions about things.
Yeah, and again, I'm at the point where I don't really understand, because it's like, I read that. Did you read the Wall Street Journal article that kind of, no, yes, it was Wall Street Journal, because there was a couple ones going out. There was like one, it was another like Toxic Man thing, which I didn't even read that, but I did.
For those of you listening at home, that was me rolling my eyes.
I heard the creak. But this one was where they kind of, it wasn't a great article, but I think aside from, I took some exception to some of the way that they put it out there, but generally it was kind of an overview for the layperson about where Star Wars is going into this movie. And it was a lot to do with like, they emphasized that Disney was confused once about the passions of the fans. Like somehow they didn't know that it's to me, it just begs credibility that they would not understand that there were, 20 years ago, there were people that, waited in line for 6 months to see these movies that they gave up.
Well documented.
Well, swaths of their 20s, hopefully, and like parts of their lives to kind of celebrate these movies. Even so, that even subsequently, when maybe the released films weren't necessarily what they expected, they kept doing it, kind of thing. It was like. Right. There wasn't like a massive, they never really thought, oh, the third one is like nobody's going to watch it. The only person who made any kind of comments about the third movie, Revenge of the Sith, to keep people straight in mind that it was going to be a flop, was Lucas himself. He always kind of like would say, oh yeah, by the third one, no one's going to want to see it because it's, it's just a movie for me at this point. I'm just finishing the story. And it turned out, I don't think it was a runaway success, but I think it met expectations, I guess, which is a thing that now they're saying going into episode 9, on the surface, they're going, oh, no, we're not worried about it. We've got robust ticket sales. But they said, well, they had robust sales, but they can't honestly say that they have like record-breaking sales. But again, third movie in the trilogy, I think all movies suffer from this. It's just, I think because it's Star Wars and it had a controversial middle act and then a spin-off that actually was I don't think there's any way you can argue it being anything other than a flop financially, yeah.
That's Solo for you.
So
scoring at home.
It's that kind of, anyway, they kind of came back at this thing as like, well, did Disney kind of botch it? And it's like, well, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I promise everyone, hang in there, we'll get to the Mandalorian.
Yes.
But no, just recently in the last few weeks, there's been this article that's been circulating around that Kathleen Kennedy was interviewed, and she was talking about, the struggles of making Star Wars, and it came across as a very, I don't know, self-serving and shallow piece because it sounds like she's like the little sister who's trying to compare herself to the big sister of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that's been a runaway success and made $1 trillion for Disney. And she's like, well, we don't have all this stuff. You guys have all this stuff. And you guys are just, and it's like, Kathy, do you remember a thing called the Expanded Universe, the EU? Like 6,000 novels and 45,000 comic books and, TV shows and video games and all that crap, all that shit that you said wasn't real anymore when you bought it. Yeah, that's
and it's interesting that that was I think even Iger reiterated that a little bit, and it made me wonder. It's like, okay, from that one appearance of Timothy Zahn at that convention in Puyallup or whatever,
at SummerCon last year,
and he's always emphasized that a certain gratitude to Lucasfilm for letting him come back and do the Thrawn books, because I think he's made it pretty clear he doesn't own Thrawn. I mean, they could do whatever they wanted with Thrawn. So I assume the way, and he joined this early on, kind of.
He's actually the one who sort of rebooted the franchise in a lot of ways. Like Star Wars was a dead property, and then in 1991 or 2 or whatever, when the first Thrawn book came out, Heir to the Empire, suddenly everyone was very interested in Star Wars again, and Lucas was like, well, I don't know, maybe I can make a few more dollars.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But so if they own that character, then the idea that
all of them,
because I guess the thing that they didn't bring up was, and my immediate thought was like, well, maybe they mean they can't use the EU because either they're not going to pay the people that created this thing again. Because, I mean, the best example I can think of is like in the Star Trek realm, the Star Trek Voyager, the character of Tom Paris. Mm-hmm. The whole thing I've always heard is that character was, because it was played by the same actor, It was supposed to be the same character in the First Duty or whatever. It's the Wesley Crusher.
The Wesley Crusher flight school thing.
Yeah, where he's basically they find out that they did an illegal move in some kind of thing.
And somebody died in a training accident.
And they tried to cover it up, and it ended up that
Wesley got kicked out.
Yeah, and this other guy went to jail.
Right.
And Voyager was going to be, they were going to touch on that character and bring that character into Voyager and have this continuum. But they didn't do it because every time they do it, they'd have to pay a royalty to the guy that wrote the original episode. Now, I don't know I'd assume that doesn't work because it's not a Writers Guild thing like a TV show.
Right.
So, why can't they take a Mara Jade or anything, any of these,
Jackson the Rabbit.
Yeah, Jackson the Rabbit, Boris Felia, all these.
I want Jackson the Rabbit.
All these characters that they have, and then no, you don't have to just do. Oh, I'm just gonna, just do this book. Just do Truth of Bakura. It's like I understand that you don't want to take a property of a book that has been out there, and it's like you don't know how many people actually like the book. And then it's like, oh, we're going to put $100 million behind a book that,
Splinters in the Mind's Eye.
Right. Yeah. So I understand it, but you can, and they have cherry-picked things.
Well, they have. I mean, the whole Thrawn thing is a perfect example because the Thrawn novels that came out in the 90s, it was post Return of the Jedi, right? So Thrawn was leading the fleet post the fall of, the Emperor and whatnot. When they decided to bring that character back into canon, they put him in the Rebels cartoon and put him prior to A New Hope, right? So he's now a Grand Admiral in the fleet before the fall of the Empire. And so the books now that Zahn is writing, they all deal with all that kind of stuff and how he became a Grand Admiral and all this stuff. But it's all during the Empire. So we've taken this character that the fans have loved and have really been passionate about, and we've transplanted him into a different portion of the timeline. And now Zahn, luckily, because it's his creation, he's being allowed to rewrite the backstory on his character. And yeah, I mean, Disney's got their hand in it, and there's a lot of, sort of awkward connections to stuff, but whatever. The fact of the matter is that you've taken an idea or you've taken a character that's beloved by the fans out of the expanded universe that was considered non-canonical, and you've brought them into canon, and you've shoehorned them in such a way where it fits, it works, it's fine, doesn't feel awkward or whatnot. I mean, Beyond the Space Whales. I know, Jeff, Beyond the Space Whales. But the whole thing is, you can do that with any character or any plot line. You can take, for example, Truth of Bakura, right? Like whatever, that novel. But you could take that storyline and rearrange it, put it in a different era, or use different characters or whatever. But you have this treasure trove of stuff, and I was being hyperbolic earlier, but I mean, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of novels.
Right.
And thousands of comic books. And somewhere in there, there's good characters and there's good plots. And, you can Frankenstein together something really awesome out of those books. But the fact that Kathy Kennedy doesn't even recognize that, like some accountant came to her and said, oh, we can't do that because it might cost us a couple of bucks or whatever. Or the lawyers were like, well, half of that shit's actually owned by other people and we don't want to pay royalties. So she just signed off on a thing and kept going. And then now she's acting all bitter and envious about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and claiming that the only reason why they're successful is because they're going to the comic books and they're going to the novels or previous cartoon series or anything based on these comic book characters and saying, oh, well, you're just cherry picking the good stuff out of there and you're just making these stories because it's all there written for you. You don't have to work at it. We have to work. We have to create these stories from whole cloth. And it's like, bullshit, lady. Bullshit.
Well, the idea that
there's fan fiction better than the shit you're putting out. Right?
And I find it hilarious that idea that somehow that she was in on the story meetings, and it's
somebody sent her an email and said they happened.
There's nothing about this where she ever talked about like her participation in the story process. Now I understand she's an executive and she has something to do. Well, unfortunately, she doesn't actually have much to say about when things come out, because apparently Solo was Bob Iger's call to have it come out 5 months after. So you can't even ding her for that, apparently. But
is that true though?
But I mean,
is that honestly true,
it's
or
no
is he
more.
Trying to...
Well, it's no more true than some of the things that they ascribe to her. I mean, I honestly think it's like you can either look at her as a failed creative, or she's a business person. And I tend to see, from what I've seen of Kathleen Kennedy, is I think she's a business person that either herself or the corporate overlords or whatever, or somebody that's giving her bad advice, decided to recast her as a creative force at Lucasfilm. Because at first she wasn't really about that. She was the executive. She was the kind of the decider. It's like, well, I'm going to go out and hunt down the greatest talent in Hollywood to make these movies that, I'm going to get the classic, I'm going to get Lawrence Kasdan. I'm going to get, I'm going to get J.J. Abrams, and who's at the time was
he was the hottest thing.
He's the hottest. Yeah. There at the time that J.J. Abrams took over, became part of The Force Awakens or whatever, he was going to do that. Yeah, there really wasn't. I mean, I was definitely kind of like, really, the guy that kind of made Star Trek, Star Wars, and whatever. But I don't think at the time I had anybody else. I think I might have said Joe Johnston or something, but then in retrospect, it's like, yeah, he's more of a guy that should have done Rogue One or Solo or something smaller. But yeah, there was no like a tour de force creative guy, even though if I don't ultimately enjoy a lot of his ideas, it's like, yeah, there's not an all-in-one guy out there right now that's young and energetic and willing to do this, but has experience like J.J. Abrams.
Right.
So I always felt, even though I've heard rumors, again, this is all rumors, that her and JJ were not really partners on this, and that was kind of why she loved working with Ryan, because he was a sport for whatever, and they seemed to have good work synergy,
right. Mm-hmm.
which may have blinded her to the idea of like, oh, maybe the product's not going to agree with fans. I don't know. She still stands behind the movie, and I honestly, as much as I, didn't like those movies, like, you have to give her credit. At least she stands behind her work, because there is something. At this point, if she started getting apologetic about it, she could concede like, well, I understand that this wasn't what the fans' expectations were. I don't even think she entertains those ideas.
Well,
but
that's probably the biggest problem.
If she just threw Rian Johnson under the bus, then it's like, well, it's like her failure is complete, because it's like
all too easy.
Because people say it's like, well, you don't understand the narrative breadth of these films, and then Hollywood goes, you don't understand how to treat creatives. You offer these people these deals, and then you immediately throw a cage around them and say, well, you can't do that. You can't do that.
But Solo the musical was never an option.
Right.
Right.
And I don't know. And it still remains to be seen. It's, it's fun to speculate, but this idea that like, oh, Kathleen Kennedy, she was making coffee until she took over Lucasfilm. It's like, come on, guys. You can't get that far. If she was just a tool, like George Lucas is not going to hand over a company. People think it's that he had this Machiavellian idea of like, well, I'm going to instill her as my little bird, and I will, if Disney does anything to displease me, then she'll be my poison pill that I will activate. And it's like, well, no, I think she's a business person.
Well, but I think there's some truth to all of it. But it's not 100% true. And I think that part of it is the truth of that final statement that you made is Lucas believed that Kathleen Kennedy, as a wholly owned subsidiary of Disney, would act on his behalf to protect, and I use that word loosely, air quotes here.
She did say it in the statement when they were signing the papers.
Right, that she was going to protect his creative, his properties and his vision and his stories and whatnot, and whether she ultimately did that or not, or whether she was just paying lip service to that or not, the results are she became the poison pill. Now, you can argue about whether or not that was at Lucas's direction or if that was through her own bad management of the process, but she became the poison pill. Now, the other thing about Kathy Kennedy is I don't accept. Yes, she started out bringing coffee to Spielberg in her very first few years in Hollywood, and I get that.
Like most people.
Like most people do. Yeah, exactly. And And so taking that story and stretching that to say that all she ever was a secretary is kind of bullshit. But, as someone who, like everybody, who's wandered through life and worked in business and you meet people who are leaders and then you meet people who are managers and you meet people who are inspirational and you meet people who are, solid, robotic, day-to-day, task people. And, is Kathleen Kennedy a creative? Probably not.
Nah, yeah, I don't get the idea.
Is she an effective manager? For sure, right? Like she runs budgets and she runs personnel decisions and all these things and she sees it to the end and, signs off on shit and whatever. But there's a disconnect there. She's doing the business part just fine. I mean, Disney's not losing money on Star Wars.
Yeah,
not
right.
yet. Not yet.
No.
I mean, they've made their investment back already. And everything after this now is, is just additional. So, but she needs someone she needs like an intermediary. She needs someone who has both a foot in the management world and the creative world to say, look, the guys making Solo are turning it into a musical comedy. You need to get over there and crack some heads. And that needed to happen way sooner than when she actually did it, and same thing with Rogue One. It was like, it's on fire over there, the production. They've written themselves into a corner. They don't know what they're doing. You need to step in. And it was kind of, that one was handled more quietly and better from a public relations standpoint. But again, it got late into the process, cost extra money and a lot of reshoots, all those things. So, like you say, she's far too trusting. But she says, okay, yeah, I'm going to hire you so-and-so, and you're going to make these movies for me, Lord and Miller. And, and then you go do your thing, and then, your assignments due at the end of this year, and then we're going to put it in post-production. And then you have to have check-ins, you have to have milestones, you have to have deliverables. Any kind of project manager will tell you that. You can't just say, okay, here's the project, and the due date is 2 years from now, and I'll see you guys in 24 months. That's not how you run a project.
Right.
And so, while she is a good manager on one hand, she's also, I think, too hands-off, and probably not, like you say, not really in tune with dealing with the creative mentality. So...
yeah,
take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then you can also look at decisions that have happened externally to her that almost kind of smack of some of the problems that people have ascribed to her. It's just like things like Galaxy's Edge being a sequel era thing rather than original trilogy,
or all-encompassing saga experience.
Right. And it's that thing where it's like people, Disney just kept, no, we want it to promote the new films, and then so much so that a long-time theme park person left, under weird circumstances. Yep. They're like, oh, she got shown the door because you people hate it. It's like, honestly, I think she was the one that kind of was putting the foot out there saying like, stop. What are we doing? What are we doing? The funny thing is it's like, and I think she's, and again, she never left a public statement. So this, again, a lot of supposition.
NDAs, yeah.
I mean, I will say that I think it will bear out if that's what her take was, that it was right, that eventually in 5 years that they will do a refresh. Because I mean, that's another.
Well, that's a Disney thing.
Another Star Wars news thing is that the Rise of the Resistance ride that has been delayed. It finally opened in. I want to say it's the Florida one that opened. I don't know if it's the Florida, the California one, because one's not opening until the new year. And of course, it's it's the ride that it's the cornerstone ride of the land.
Right.
It's
the Star Tours of Star Tours.
Well, it's bigger than Star. I mean,
I know.
No, but have you watched any of the 4K streams where they go through on the? They actually show which is so weird. Now, if I had been a kid, I would have never have needed Disneyland. I just watched YouTube videos, and I would I'm going to go to Disney. Like, can I just
saw it?
Can I just take the cash, Mom? But now it's like I've already seen both. Like, there's both of the versions of the Rise of the Resistance ride, depending on which of the two booths or whatever that you get in, and it's like, the CGI and the animatronic fin on both different.
Animatronic fin.
Yeah, there's an animatronic fin. Oh my god. Which and
welcome to the Hall of Presidents.
Exactly. You're gonna Disney Plus me, says John Boyega. But it looks exciting, but it's actually at first I was like, it looks dumb, but then I watched like when they somebody did a very sloppy video, and I watched one that's like a whole like 15 minutes from entry to exit. I mean, it's a substantial ride. It's definitely. Right. I kind of feel bad for friends of ours that kind of went already and haven't had a chance to get it because my brother-in-law was just down in Florida and he missed it too, and I'm like, oh man. Well, I guess that gives you a reason to go back,
right?
But it looks like, I mean, like I said, my point is though, but it looks like a great ride. But yes, there's elements of it that I can absolutely see that in 5 years that they're gonna take the First Order looking headpiece off of this and put the regular guns on it that look, and just take the boring animatronic stormtroopers that only kind of go like tilt their head a little bit, and they sit there. They're supposed to be like troopers. It's like the posture's weird, but they'll just put stormtrooper armor on it. This is, and that's probably when I'll go.
As to say, yeah, and when they finally put the round radar dish on the Falcon, I'll go.
But I will say that, to their credit, they committed to the bit. They got the original actors to do the interstitials. I mean, you get Oscar Isaacs doing it, John Boyega and Daisy have done stuff, and I'm not 100% sure. They got what's his name, the Irish actor, Hux. He's in it, and I don't know if I think it's Adam Driver.
General Huggs?
Yeah, General Huggs. I think Adam Driver is
Donald Gleason.
Yeah, Donald Gleason, and I think it's what's his face is Kylo Ren. It could be. It's like that thing where you get the toy and you're like, is that James Earl Jones or is that a computer?
Nice, yeah.
And so I wasn't 100% sure
if
it's him, but they've got like animatronic versions of them moving through the thing, and then they use hologrammatic, like your Tupac hologram with the lightsaber coming down and.
Tupac with a lightsaber.
Yeah, exactly.
Boba Fett.
He's the rose that rose from concrete. But but he it looks cool, but again, thousands of dollars to go down there and see it. I don't know. It'll be, and especially now that you see that some of this, and I'll start to pivot to our topic. The interviews, some of the early interviews come out where like, did I share that one with a clip of Oscar Isaac being interviewed with Kerry Russell?
Was that the one where he's like, I don't care about it, or I don't.
And they're basically, and they're like, so you want to do a Disney series? And he goes, nope, like that. And Kerry Russell lets out this guffaw, and she goes, I fucking love you. And it's just like, it's so like the veil dropped that they're just doing the press for this thing, and they're already fucking sick of it, which makes me wonder, were they filming last week?
Possibly. Well, and that's the other thing. Like there is what's her name? She was on Collider Video. She's my future ex-wife. What's her name?
I don't know.
Anyway, she used to be on Collider Video, but she was doing an interview with the cast at.
Was it Cornet Roth?
No.
Roth Cornet or whatever.
No. Anyway, but they were down at Galaxy's Edge, down by the Galaxy's Edge, and they had Anthony Daniels and then the whole crew. And her question was, without using any words, give me your facial expression or give me your reaction to seeing the completed version or whatever, or the most complete, most recent test screening of this film, right? Wait, she said the final version, but in reality, if you've been following the press on it, it's the most recent current assembly of all the bits and pieces that they think might actually be released in the theater.
Right.
So,
AKA a movie.
Right, yeah, also known as, a Star Wars movie. Hey, everybody, I think we just made a Star Wars movie. Shut the fuck up, Rian Johnson. Fuck you. Anyway, so... Yeah, so she asked this question of everybody, and they all make these faces, and it's classic. Like, Anthony Daniels has his hands up, and he's like, what? Like, what? He's like doing this whole thing, and then if you listen to it in the background, like, you can hear him say quietly, he's like, 40 years and it ends like this, right? And I'm like, oh. Shit.
I hope that's a joke, but I mean
I hope so,
but that Game of Thrones, that thing where Emilia Clarke kind of basically screws up her face and goes, best season ever.
Yeah, right?
And you're like, and you laugh about it because it's like, oh, you know, they're in the middle of Belfast in winter, and it's like it's a lot of hard work,
right?
And you think, oh, they're just joking around because that's what movie sets do, but then Game of Thrones came out and it was a very big
dumpster fire.
Yeah, it was a dumpster fire. It was terrible. They admitted they rushed, you know, and it makes me wonder. It's like,
that's why those guys lost those movies.
Well, is the truth out there? And they're just like, well, we can say the truth because all these fucking nerds will basically do our work for us. They'll either create enough schism or dust or whatever so people will obscure the truth of it. It's kind of like the idea of, I doubt anybody listens to this from this fandom menace or whatever, but it's like kind of they create the static and it's almost like counter programming because it's like they've over leveraged this idea that there were test screenings. I mean, from the get go, I don't know if people know this, and I don't want to use names because I don't want to I just want to pick on the idea. I don't want to pick on the channels that are doing this, but the whole idea that there were anyone. Yes, I assume that like J.J. Abrams' wife has seen The Rise of Skywalker. I assume Ben Burt has seen it. I assume people that work the office pool. I assume that whatever's left of this story group that doesn't exist anymore apparently has seen it. But the idea that people got called in a shopping center and were offered a gift card to watch an assembly cut of Episode 9, 2 months before it comes out, the most guarded plot lines for movies in movie history. The Star Wars films, I don't think there's anything out there, because even with Marvel, it does suffer from the problem of 60, 70 years of storytelling that you can always go, Endgame, they're just going to pilfer something from the comic books or whatever. It's like you can, Age of Ultron, before that movie came out, you could go buy the Age of Ultron comic books.
True.
They didn't have the same story, but you can go, well, I bet you anything this is the toolbox. So Star Wars does have that thing where it's like they can keep it contained almost up, again, there's been toy leaks and, they send stuff out to the mock-ups and then all of a sudden it's like, so I understand there is potential for leaks and there has been true leaks and and I've read the Reddit synopsis, the 15-page synopsis of Episode 9, and yes, if you look at the subsequent photos that have leaked out, that it all draws like, oh my gosh, she's holding the item that was referred to 6 months ago. So, but I'm not ready to go, oh, it's all true. It's all true. All of it. But the idea that, what is a cut of this film? Yes, I assume that there's versions of the film floating around, but I doubt that they're fundamentally different. I mean, I was watching our old buddy Mike Zero, talking about
future Star Wars content.
It's 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever. In the summer, he was basically, George Lucas has been brought in on the production, and it's very good for a guy like George Lucas, who is actually the architect of the saga, to come down. He will fix the saga because really nobody understands these characters better. So you kill every character that George Lucas ever created.
And then you bring him in to consult.
On all like, well, what would Chewbacca do?
I need
what would Lando do? Well, Lando
would go fuck a toaster.
Lando would have dinner at 4:00 because he's 82 years old.
Also true.
Then he'd take a leak because his prostate is literally the size of a jelly donut right now.
Oh my God! You just swore me off jelly donuts forever.
And he would you'd catch him fucking the Millennium Falcon's data port for old time's sake. No, but it's
accurate.
It's just ironic that they think that somehow George Lucas, who, called Disney white slavers,
also accurate,
and. All this stuff about that Bob Iger disclosed about his thing, that's old news. I mean, George had to show up because he didn't get that $4.2 billion in cash. He got it in stock, guys.
That's right.
So he had to show up when they opened Galaxy's Edge to cut the ribbon and stuff like that. And he'll probably show up at the premiere and go, yeah, that looks pretty good. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. I mean, he does the bare minimum for his, because they knew that you can't just pay a guy a bunch of million, they know they overpaid for it. Apparently, the estimate.
Did they?
Well, I mean, for you and I, we don't think that, but if the rumor is the valuation that he basically was able to squeeze like another $500 million out of them or something.
Well, so that's interesting to me. And by the way, your Mike Zero is spot on. That's interesting to me because if you handled the property the way that I think a lot of the old school fan base would have handled the property, that was the goddamn golden goose, man. You just money. It's money falling out of everywhere. It's a bank. It's a cash machine. Whatever your analogy. If you handled it right, it was a $1 trillion property that you got for pennies. The problem is they fucked it up. And not only did they fuck up Star Wars, they fucked up the toy industry, like the global toy industry.
Yeah, that is true. They helped cause Toys R Us to go out of business.
Well, they collapsed Toys R Us. They cost, Mattel and Hasbro. So here's a little insider knowledge, and I don't own stock in any of these companies, so you can't get me for insider trading. But 2 years ago, Hasbro was in negotiations to buy Mattel. Okay, now that's like Pepsi buying Coke. Okay, that's like the two primary companies in the industry merging to form a mega toy corp. Okay, which would hold all of the intellectual properties from all the comic books, all the movies, all the cartoons, you name it, right? There's 3 major toy companies that distribute in America. There's Hasbro, there's Mattel, and then there's a company called Spin Master. And Spin Master does a lot of your other stuff, right?
Like fidget spinners?
No. It's unrelated, but yes. They do a lot of like games. They do a lot of like your kids, bulky toys, like outdoor play toys and things like that, whatever. So they're on the periphery. They handle all the stuff that's not licensed, basically. You need a kid's shopping cart with some fake groceries. Like, it's probably a Spin Master toy, right? So you're talking about the two icons in the industry merging. Hasbro was fresh off of the toy sales from The Last Jedi. Or not Last Jedi, sorry, Force Awakens, right? There was this massive, and we've talked about this, but the massive upswell of interest in the franchise, and everybody was buying toys, everything was selling, hype. Everybody was on board. Hasbro was looking at their numbers and they're like, "Fuck, we're gonna own the world," right? And so Mattel, on the other hand, was coming down off of the DC Universe fail, and all their DC related toys were just shitting the bed, right? And it was like nobody was buying anything, and they were losing money on that license. And so this whole negotiation was going on. Toys R Us was flirting with bankruptcy, but they were seeing the upswing in the industry, and they were banking on Star Wars saving their business. 2 years later, after The Last Jedi, you have the deal is unspun from Mattel and Hasbro. Hasbro has to lay off 25% of their workforce. Okay. Toys R Us goes bankrupt, falls apart. Everything is sold off to, investment bankers and whatnot. So the iconic toy chain in America, well, and also in the world, I mean, they're all over the place, but the iconic toy chain in America is gone. The two major toy companies are struggling now to try and stay solvent, because the Star Wars license for Hasbro costs so much goddamn money that they barely make it back on toy sales. And that's on good years. When they have these mega sale years like they did in the lead up to The Force Awakens, they're making a shit ton of money. But it's things like HasLab and the barge, and we've had our jokes about the barge, but it's those types of things that are making them money because they're in control of that. The shit that Disney tells them, well, you're going to make 12 figures for the first wave, and when we pack a case of figures, you're going to get 8 Rays, and you're going to get 2 other characters. So you got to buy 45 cases of shit just to get enough of the things that people want, and then you have all these peg warmers, right? I mean, that's been well documented out there, and if you want to go look around. There's a bunch of YouTube videos about that, and it's true, but the Star Wars and the way Disney handled it after the purchase has really not only killed Disney or killed Star Wars as a property when it comes to selling toys and selling merchandise and other things. It's really had a massive ripple effect in the economy and the community of businesses that are associated with these tie-ins. And they still sit around and look at each other and they're like, well, it's just angry white guys that just hate it. And it's like, no, really, it's not. It's a series of really shitty business decisions that they made, and like hiring Rian Johnson to write and direct this freaking movie, and then the doubling down on it, and then the abusing of the fans and all this stuff. It's like the money's just going away, and people are going to buying other things and doing other stuff. But it would be okay if we could just punish Disney and Lucasfilm and make them, struggle. But the thing is that Disney is it's like Amazon. It's in everything. It's everywhere. And its tentacles are so deep in everything that when you fuck them up, you wind up fucking up a lot of other people and causing a lot of other problems. And, as someone who lost a seasonal job at Hasbro because of that shit, hey, I kind of feel that pain. So fuck you, Rian Johnson. But anyway, it's just, it's this thing where, we've seen... We can see it with our own eyes, and there's plenty of dispassionate business pieces. Like if you really want to learn, like you say, about what's going on in Star Wars, fuck IO9 and Reddit and Screen Rant and all that bullshit. Go read the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. Go read Forbes. Because they'll tell you what's going on.
Yeah, they did dip into that. A bit of in my personal feeling, and it's like boring theory, the canard that this idea that there was this mass movement that rejected the casting of the new movies, which
is bullshit.
Which is bullshit. And I guess that's all that needs to be said on that. But generally, yeah, the idea of how Lucasfilm, Disney, blah, 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 how it all sits in the mix of the economy. And it's, again, there are a lot of changes, and I feel like and not having kids is, I don't really understand how kids engage with toys, or even if they really do. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of people say, oh, no, kids are about screens. Well, it's never 100% of anything. It's like, I assume that they still like a lot of toys, though, yeah. But yeah. But I mean, I think it's just fundamentally how Disney decided they wanted their whole brand to kind of interact. There's been this real push about this kind of idea that somehow, let the kids set the tone for things. Like, we have to think about the future. You can't leverage, our 40-year property with a bunch of 40-year-old guys. And that's true, but at the same token, they missed a real great opportunity of kind of dovetailing this idea that, let the fans kind of inform the new fans. And it's not really gatekeeping, but it's like kind of like a parent.
That's French.
Le parent. Like the parent engages with the child at Star Wars. It's like kind of like, I'm handing this down to you, and then ultimately the child will engage with it how they want to engage.
Right, but you have the introduction, the generational handoff.
But it seems like they flip-flopped it. Like they tried to predict how the kids were going to engage with it, and then like there's a bunch of like these parents that are like, am I going on Reddit? Am I doing this right? I'm dressing like Kylo Ren. And it's like, I'm letting my kids set the tone for how Star Wars is, how we do Star Wars. Right. I mean, I know this is kind of like, what the fuck? But I mean, I'm just saying my point is that maybe kids would like to go like, well, if I'm going to engage with this with my parents,
right?
Maybe it would be a sharing kind of thing, not just I'm just going to throw you in the thing and then you enjoy it and then we'll play with it the way you want to. And it's like, I think ultimately what you're doing is you're creating the kids are looking at it as kind of disposable. It's kind of just one of a million other things.
Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's just another brand. And Disney's not really good about, they're really great about getting the money to cultivate brands, but they're not really good about knowing what to do with them once they own them.
Also true.
Because, look at the Muppets. It's like most kids now don't even know who the Muppets are. Like, I tried to play, like, the Muppet Show.
The ones that sell insurance.
Yeah, for my nieces and stuff. And they're
Facebook
just like, this is
or
boring. What is this? It's like, like the rides are closed at the Disneyland. There's no movie in development. There's no TV show. But again, the most you ever see Kermit the Frog is in that tea meme where he's like,
drinking his tea.
And that's not, I just think that they kind of thought that they could kind of go around the parents and just appeal to the kids. And I think that might have been a mistake. I think if you could have got that synergy of like downwit, it's like high-end toys and collectibles for the adults.
Right.
A new wave to enjoy. Instead, they go, well, we just need to let's make the original movies more Zam-Pow. Let's do cartoons of the original movies and have everything be
Forces of Destiny.
Or whatever there's the Galaxy's Adventures or Adventures. Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, the new one that they just came out with is garbage too. I think everybody knows that the Forces of Destiny was a complete flop. If you go to a Tuesday morning and the stacks and stacks of memorabilia and books and nobody, but not even like collectors really bought that stuff. Everybody, some people bought.
Sorry,
but maybe now we should kind of start to pivot into this.
Well, this is okay. It's nice because this whole talk that we've had, we've lovingly chronicled the failure of Kathleen Kennedy's stewardship of Disney Lucasfilm. However, in that dumpster fire of bullshit and gender politics and anger and all that crap and mismanagement and stupid decisions, from that fire and those ashes rises the phoenix of The Mandalorian.
Right.
Which is a show that looks, feels, acts, and delivers like original Star Wars did. And somehow, amongst all this crap we've been talking about, two dudes, not us, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, have somehow managed to create a thing that feels like the Star Wars of our youth. And it's like almost I feel like they got away with it, in a way, right. After this big talk we've had. So,
yeah, it happened. This is, and yeah, it's parallel to all the bitching and stuff we're talking about. This is being created in parallel. I don't think this is a thing that they just whipped up 4 months ago.
No, not at all. Yeah.
This has been in the works. So it's like the idea that there obviously is some kind of brain trust. Or I don't know if there's two parallel ideas or I get it. Again, it's the idea of like, I don't know, the story group. Definitely the story group's not something you hear about anymore.
No, it's gone.
The rumor is that that's been dissolved and that basically people are now middle management types and that nobody is coming to them they're just going like, have we already had a character named Sardonicus? It's like, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Go to Wikipedia before you come in here with
exactly.
That shit, right?
It's like, it used to be this idea that like, all these kind of Bay Area transplants were going to be kind of guiding this thing. And now it's like, nope. I don't know who pulled the plug on that. And,
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Again, in parallel to what's going on with The Mandalorian, right? Jon Favreau has written the entire first season of The Mandalorian.
Which I think that's insane. The only other time you hear about a creator scripting their an entire season was, and again, it was probably a much larger output, was J. Michael Straczynski. I think he wrote every episode of the third season of Babylon 5.
Right.
And that's
an even larger undertaking because when you look at The Mandalorian, season 1 is going to be 8 episodes of about 40 minutes apiece.
Yeah, on average.
And now you were talking about with Babylon 5, that was a regular TV show.
Yeah, that's like a 22
episode,
that's a 22 episode season.
Which is still, trust me, I haven't written a single episode of television, so all of it sounds like a lot of work to me, but Jon Favreau has sat down and he's leaned heavily on Dave Filoni because Dave Filoni is actually the real keeper of Star Wars and the Lucas vision of Star Wars. And he's put together this story and this product, and so far it hasn't really disappointed in any way. But yet we had this story group that was created by Kathleen Kennedy, and of course, there's the famous picture of all of them wearing the Force's female shirts, and they all show up to these things, and they're like, we're writing Star Wars. And then you look at The Last Jedi, written and directed by
Rian Johnson.
Force Awakens, written by J.J. and Kasdan.
Yeah.
Right?
Solo
written by Kasdan and his son. Rogue One was written by
Tony Gilroy. Some of it was John Knoll. Some of it was it was like a pastiche.
And so now we have Episode 9 coming out,
written by J.J. Abrams and writer Chris Terrio.
Right, Chris Terrio.
I don't know.
Star Wars for future content.
The guy who wrote Batman v Superman or Justice League or something like that.
So, what did this group of 8 women that Kathleen Kennedy hired to be the story group for Disney, what did they actually do? Like, did they write? They wrote the little short episodes for Forces of Destiny. They presided over telling people what they could and couldn't put in the novels they were writing, and then banged a few heads over at Marvel and told them you can't do this, you can't do that. Like, what did they actually write?
I honestly think it seems to be like it shook out that they ended up being more responsible for TV, book content and comic content.
Okay,
and maybe I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. They were always so mysterious. That was the thing. I kind of initially when they announced it, I was like, "Well, that's really interesting." I wanted to do a thing where back when we were doing just a straight Star Wars podcast, if it's a slow news week or whatever, let's do pick a different member of the crew and kind of go through their thing, which now would be a little different because that's the thing where people go now at these YouTube channels just literally go through people's CVs and go, I don't see any TV on this. Like when Kiri Hart, when they were kind of just I don't know because they like to say, oh, they're all creatives, but generally I think there's only a few people at any given time actually doing creative stuff. Most of the time it's stewardship and managerial type things. It's I don't know why. Apparently Kiri Hart had a lot to do with that kind of stuff, and then when she left Lucasfilm, that was the sign that they were we're not going to go with that explicitly kind of pushing a narrative here of whatever narrative. Again, I never heard anybody come out and say this is what we're going to do. It's all just supposition. Oh, well, around Lucasfilm, they all hate Luke Skywalker. And it's oh, okay. And that's why he's being killed off on all these things. And not because he's 65 years old and you're not going to be.
We don't know how much longer we're going to have him.
You can't leverage your property on a guy who's loold, looks like somebody's grandpa. But so a lot of this, they would always, eventually it became, Pablo Hidalgo. And then later, after Pablo has had his little nervous breakdown, I don't know, whatever, he's come to the reason that people don't like him on the thing, and it's the people that are the people that kind of swooped in, to defend these new movies. And again, you can defend them all you want, but I'm saying I don't really want to defend them, but
not worthy.
I'm just thinking about all these, I'm thinking about all the people that are still kind of. That one guy likes to call the access media, the access media. It's it's
it's a real thing though.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's the people.
Look, man, when Collider did their solo kickoff show from inside of a Denny's. Okay, so they could cross-promote all the Denny's crap and show you the cups and the menus.
That guy has been busting his ass for Star Wars for 2 years, man, and I didn't get invited to Galaxy's Edge. Yeah, so, I guess I understand. There is this access, this idea that you support the product, and that if you criticize the product, you
lose access.
Yeah, and you have to do just enough to keep your access. So that's the real hard job about being a professional Star Wars nerd content thing. It's just to push back. And then you get those guys like Campia that, I think he said something, I think he got outside the love fest. And so now he's constantly seesawing back between these extreme opinions. Kathleen Kennedy needs to go, or we need to take the Star Wars back from the toxic fans. And you're dude, what is up with that guy? I've never liked Campia. I've never watched an entire video, so I just think of him as that, because didn't he cry one time? Or something?
Yes, he's anyway. Yeah, for those of you who are interested, you should go look him up. He's a real fantastic fellow. He's a Canadian guy, and he used to be on the Collider Jedi Council. Him and Sweaty Snap.
Late John Schnepp.
Yeah, and I forget the other guy's name, but they had this great show early on, the Collider Jedi Council, and it was a weekly show. It was like an hour, and it was not unlike the old version of the Talking Bird cast. It would be like, hey, what's up in this week in Star Wars? Oh, we got these books or these comics or whatever. And they would go through and do reviews, and it was pretty. It was pretty down the middle. I mean, there was some support, there was some criticism, but it never swung too far in either direction, right? They kind of stayed in their lane and kind of rode the middle line, and that was fine. And then Collider went, I think they got bought or something. There was a series of videos that happened over the last few years where they would get everybody in a room, and it was almost like you were watching an all-hands meeting, right? Like some dude that you never saw before would come in and be like, I'm the president and CEO of Collider. There's going to be changes, and you're like, oh, shit, right? And then pretty soon, Campia was starting to shill out pretty hard. He was running with the narrative of the toxic fan base and the man babies and all that crap, and he was hitting it pretty hard. And I don't know if they told him to reel it in, or if they told him that you're fine to have that, but could you do it on a different platform or on a different show, not on this show, because this show is trying to tie itself to Disney, Star Wars, and we're trying to get that access. And so he wound up just giving Collider the finger, and he left the whole platform and tried to go do his own thing. And he was like, and moved back to Canada or whatever. I don't know. But his shows now, like you're talking about, his videos, it's like him in his office at his house, surrounded by pops, and he's like crying about whatever happened to Star Wars. And you're like, dude, you went off the end of the earth there for a minute. But the Collider just fell into.
But that's the sad thing. It's like you kind of have to tie yourself to this thing, and then you can never talk about it in a real way. It's almost like kind of the ancillary to what I was complaining about on our last episode, but with, again, the fandom menace about these people that they can't see the forest for the trees, which I had to realize to myself. It's like, as I kind of think of Star Wars, my enjoyment of Star Wars is like people that, because I'm not a sports guy, but somebody that's like maybe which team was the one that got kind of the curse of the Bambino, with the old thing that they never won because they had traded off.
Boston.
Boston.
Yeah, Boston.
Yeah, it's just the idea. It's like when you're with
JR knows about that.
Yes,
He'll tell you all
I was
about
thinking of JR when I brought that up, but just the idea of a franchise, because we call them franchises, and we don't. And I just flippantly say that because I'm not a sports guy, but it really is that kind of idea of these. After decades, they become a franchise, and it's you either have to find a way in it to enjoy it, or you really do have to find another team, because it becomes like if it becomes this franchise, if it becomes the exercise of, well, nothing they ever do is right, then it just becomes this tedium. And I feel like that's where the Phantom, we got the Nerd Crew, which is the Red Letter Media's parody of all these channels, the very cool kind of thing. Or you had these people like, I have, I have it on good authority that Kathleen Kennedy sacrificed a baby at the Presidio, and she's holding back a cut of the movie that has Luke, Han, and Leia all having lunch together in a restaurant, and they don't want you to have that.
Having shawarma with the Avengers.
And you can see it because the same thing as these Collider types get all like pissed off, like, oh, I didn't get invited to this thing, and I'm busting my ass covering this thing that I don't really like, but I'm pretending I like so I can go to Disneyland for free. These other guys I'm literally paying my rent off the fact that I went from being a guy who grew up loving Star Wars and Star Trek, that if I start to go, actually, this isn't so bad, that I'm going to start losing views because people want it. They want to escalate like, no, there were test screenings. And, if you're saying that, then it's like you're a shill and you've been bought and paid for. And you're like, I mean, I understand there's a certain theater to it all.
Oh, of course.
And I hope that people, people that actually engage in this kind of stuff, consume it, realize that there is a theater to it. It's become professional wrestling's manifest in fandoms. Because I mean, guys literally wear fucking costumes and talk in funny voices.
Victor Van Doomcock?
Yeah, and it's like, you know, I love that guy. I hope he understands that he is essentially he's his own version of a heel.
Well, yeah.
Although sometimes when I hear them talk on their live streams, I question that maybe they, you know, have gone over the deep end of the thing. Like, again, they can't see the forest for the trees of, like, you know, I've not heard you guys say a positive thing about anything. It's all like this legacy idea that, like, well, this stuff meant something to me 20 years ago, but now it means nothing. Well, it's like, if you've hated something for 20 years, maybe it's time for you to fucking get into, like, heirloom tomatoes or something. You know, it's just...
Well, this is the thing, you know, these people, like, and I understand it. Like, I have these properties, these franchises that, you know, I hold dear from my youth, you know, Star Wars, Star Trek, G.I. Joe. And, you know, over the last decade, they've all kind of either petered out, been mismanaged, or have been completely transformed into something that doesn't represent the original product that we fell in love with in our youth. And
yeah.
And then you can say that, you know, but you also have to, like we do, you know, you also have to say from time to time, these people are doing a good job at some things, you know,
yeah.
and you know, for, again, The Mandalorian, right?
Yeah, and I guess we probably should
start talking about it. But, you know, but the thing is that is an example of something being done right, and the fans are clearly recognizing that, and they're latching onto it, and it's having great success. The thing is that you can't hide from that anymore. The leadership of Lucasfilm can't hide from the fact that they've made, you know, a medium movie and a shit movie, and now they're on the hook to try and finish a trilogy, which is basically not a trilogy because they're trying to undo and rewrite and just forget about the second one and then finish it all off. They're in a hole right now, you know, and they want to blame the toxic fans and all this crap, and it's like, no, look, everybody, well, except for like 3 feminists with blue hair on Twitter, everybody likes The Mandalorian.
Right.
Like, they love the visuals. They love the Easter eggs that are thrown into each episode. The storytelling, you know, the Baby Yoda. And for Matt, Baby Yoda is a character in the show. I know you haven't seen any episodes yet. I know you sent a message about that today.
I know, because you're really cheap and you can't afford $6.
I know, right? Like, I'll give you my login. Just watch the goddamn show, Matt. Okay? All right. Anyway. And if Disney, if you're listening, I'm not handing out my login. But yeah, these everybody likes it. Like the prequel people love it, the sequel people love it, and the original trilogy people love it because all of it is serviced in that show. You get call outs to the prequels. There's robots, and there's, you know, like, you got battle droids, and you've got the pit droids, and you've got all that stuff. You got original trilogy stuff. We got the, you know, the Wilro Hood ice cream machine. The pole, a similar pole to the one that Han Solo and Luke tried to prop the trash compactor with, was leaning up against the wall in the scene when these people walk through an alley. And it's like every Star Wars fan went, holy shit, that's the thing.
It's the pole.
It has nothing to do with the episode at all, but it's leaning up against the wall in the background. And we all, you know, fucking bricked our pants. We're like, oh my God, this is so awesome. You know. So, look, it's doing the right stuff. It's hitting all the right beats. It's a completely new and different series based on a whole bunch of new and different characters. And the great thing is that this show is like Rogue One. Well, technically, I'll take that back. Not like Rogue One. Rogue One was mostly this way. But you create a series or a film or a bunch of characters that we care about, that we're into, and that reside in this universe that we love and know, but they are not Skywalkers. Okay? They are not even related to the Skywalkers. They have nothing to do with these people. They have nothing to do with the rebellion or any of that crap. It's a completely independent story that resides in the universe, and it doesn't feel forced, weird, shoehorned, or otherwise, like a money grab. It's like, hey, we are actually expanding this universe. And I think part of the problem with the way that who the fuck am I? The way that Disney has handled these new movies is that instead of expanding the universe and creating more and widening the tapestry of characters and locations and all these things, they just keep tightening it down. And it's like, oh, it's all about Luke and Leia and the Emperor and all this shit. And it's like, and it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And we're going to keep going back to desert planets. And they're not really Tatooine, everybody, but it's Tatooine. And I was like, all that shit. It doesn't feel like we're growing the universe or the narrative. We're shrinking it down. But then along comes the Mandalorian. And it's like, yeah, the last episode we went to Tatooine. Okay?
Yeah.
but you're showing a guy who's bouncing around in the Outer Rim, and he's going to all these Outer Rim worlds, and we're visiting all these new places. Yeah, he's going to Tatooine, but the thing was that there wasn't any it didn't feel forced or weird or like we're trying to be like, oh, and this is where he met Luke or what, like any of that.
Yeah,
crap.
They're not trying to make it too serendipitous.
Yeah, no, he winds up in the same bar at the end, but other than that, yeah, you see some sand people, there's a dewback. I mean, all the things you would expect to find out there on Tatooine, but his story was independent of all that shit.
Well, I think that, ultimately the feel of the show, I think the reason it's been successful, it was something that I think was successful at the time, but maybe not a runaway success, because even I didn't delve too much into them, is the Dark Horse comics.
Right.
The whole Star Wars tales and things like they would tell things that weren't necessarily connected to the main, that Skywalker saga that we've been hearing, Skywalker saga.
Right.
And it's like, if you think about the formula of, like, say, the original trilogy versus the prequels, so we're talking episode 1, not the sequel trilogy.
Right.
One of the things that people kind of gave a ding on the thing is that, and at the time I thought, well, yes, there was a wide, expansive universe in the original trilogy, but it was generally hinted at. You never saw great population centers. It was always the margins. It was the people in the backwater planets, the swamp planets, the abandoned planets, the planets controlled by crime lords, the primitive people, things that are just spaceports, or you're on military installations. And one of the big differences in the prequels is that you were going to a lot of planets, and you got this kind of expansion of the universe, but it kind of caused the story to kind of get washed out a little bit, of like, oh, taxations of trade routes, and people are like, what? It's like, do I get how many droid tax credit for this? And now they've made that, and again, not being negative, but the inherent problems of, as you expand a universe like Star Wars, which isn't, I don't want to say it's not narratively rich, because a lot of things they talk about, it's like they don't, they did talk about this in The Mandalorian, which was kind of at great length, something that they never talk about in Star Wars is like people going to the bathroom. Not that I was super wondering. It's like, oh, when's Luke going to take a shit before where he meets Vader? It's like, did he poop out in the forest before he walked up to a stormtrooper and said, hey, I'd like to surrender? Or did he actually shit when he got on the Death Star? Not that it's really important. It's like,
that's awesome.
It's like, I'm taking you in front of my master. Thanks, Dad. Can I take a shit first? Because I don't want to meet Palpy with a bun in my colon. But no, but I mean, my point is like, that's going into this idea that Star Wars is going to be a weekly TV thing. I had much trepidation, because then you get into this thing like people are going to be sitting in rooms and having conversations, and then things eventually, if you look at a TV series like a CSI where it's just constant, like every week it's a different murder, but then eventually it's like, well, we've kind of, we've had the guy that kills people with alphabet soup, and then we have the person that kills people with farm equipment. And so eventually they go, well, we have to have the characters start fucking, otherwise we're going to get canceled because we run out of ideas.
Right. And then that kills the show.
Right. And
Moonlighting.
And it's like that the idea that Star Wars scenes are going to show super fast on a weekly TV show. And I think maybe Filoni and, I shouldn't give Filoni the credits. I give Favreau the credit. It's the F thing. Is that he's able to, by keeping the episodes
short.
Yeah, he doesn't, there's not a lot of filler, because that's my big...
Except the last episode.
Yeah. I think the big problem with a lot of TV shows is that, and that why I'm hesitant to start a TV show is because it's become a system of all right, the first episode, you're going to kind of get a general idea of who you're dealing with as characters, and then it's usually going to end the third part of the tripod of the story is going to explain what is the quest, what is going to be the schism that at least press the whole first season of this episode.
What's the underlying driving force?
And and they dispense with that. It's a very simple in this Mandalorian. It's literally the MacGuffin of this, and you don't even know it going in. You don't actually know until the third episode what really the narrative thrust of this is going to be. It's going to be this him throwing it all away for an abandoned child or whatever. What he perceives to be a child. We don't really. It acts like
he's 50.
It's a baby, I guess. But and then you tie into this idea of he's been abandoned too, and so it's kind of not. It's not going to sustain multiple seasons. But it's enough of a nugget. And I think that's what Star Wars does better. It's not like we're going to draw out this long idea of, and it's probably if you think about a dense, richly packed first episode of a show.
Encounter at Farpoint?
Yeah, something like Farpoint. That kind of gives you a lot of. That kind of gives you general.
It was bad, but yeah, I get.
I'm thinking actually what I was thinking. I was thinking of the very first episode of Game of Thrones, and
yeah, that throws a lot of crap at you really fast.
There is so much so it's.
That's true.
And even things,
I had to go rewatch it a couple of times.
Yeah, it's just that thing where you're like, wow, there's a lot. You don't know about palace intrigue that much, but you kind of know. That thing ends. The first episode of Game of Thrones begins with wildlings being attacked by whatever, White Walkers or whatever.
Yeah, but you don't know.
You don't know what it is, and it ends with Bran Stark being kicked out of the window by Jaime Lannister.
Right.
And that's a lot. A lot of that stuff is carries on throughout the whole story. But that doesn't happen in this. And that actually might be a good thing with this.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to give it kind of a certain flexibility. If they realize, all right, we've milked every drop out of this Baby Yoda idea, then we can pivot. It's not just going to be I don't think this show is just going to be Baby Yoda for seasons and seasons. The closest I could actually think about it being is it reminds me very much of episodic television, genre television from the 70s.
Okay.
Like Kung Fu.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I just kind of started watching David Carradine's Kung Fu, and I was kind of, with my 2019 eyes, I didn't want to just jump into something and be like, oh, yeah, I remember that great show, and then you're like, oh, my God, this is horrible, it's his portrayal is so insensitive to, but there are subtleties, even for 1975, that they deal with the idea that, he's biracial and stuff, and he has this conflict. He's of two worlds.
Right.
And it's like the kind of the Mandalorian idea that he's not
fully Mandalorian.
He's not fully Mandalorian. He's not fully accepted, but he wears the armor. He clings to it, and there's flashbacks, although the grasshopper flashbacks of Key Luke in the original, so were much more almost... George, I bet you anything he stole some of that stuff for Yoda. Because he had the idea of how do you impart the neophyte, the untrained, you don't know a lot about what his character. Again, I didn't do a full deep dive. I didn't do all 3 seasons of him, but from what I've watched, and it reminded me of that stuff. So it's that kind of thing where I can kind of get the feeling for it's like, as much as I'm enjoying it, I'm like, wow, I don't think kids would. I don't know. Would kids even dig this? It's like I think that's why they threw the Baby Yoda in.
Well, it's interesting that one of the big comparisons or whatnot of because hey, it's 2019 and we always have to go out and accuse people of ripping things off, but because nothing is new, right? But the biggest comparison I've heard about the show is that it's the Japanese manga Lone Wolf and Cub.
Right.
And there was also a series of movies made about that back in the day. But the whole idea of, you have in that book, which came out, I want to say in the 70s, it's, the disgraced samurai who's now wandering, whatever, and his family was killed except for his son, who was, very young, and he kind of puts the life choice on the kid by giving him a choice between a toy and a weapon.
Okay.
And the child picks the weapon, and so then they embark on this quest for revenge and for redemption. It's the whole wrongly accused, kicked out of everything.
It's the fugitive. It's the A-team.
Exactly. And so he and his son then go and they start, chopping heads and kicking ass, and he's training his son, and then it's the whole thing of the child who looks innocent but is very deadly, and this whole revenge quest. And it went on for years, like it's thousands of pages of manga. But it's not quite 100%. The Mandalorian is not a 1-to-1, on that, but it's very close because we've seen the power that Baby Yoda has, right? Clearly he's a very powerful Force wielder. But he's still restrained or childlike in his use of it. It's not fully a martial skill. It's not, he just, like for example, the big horned beast is trying to attack the Mandalorian, and so he just lifts it up. He's like, well, you're not going to charge him anymore because I just lifted you up off the ground or whatever.
Yeah, it's a utilitarian kind of way of looking at it.
Yeah, he doesn't hurt the animal or do anything. I mean, ultimately Mando kills it, but spoiler alert.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. It dies. But so the whole thing, it's built the same way. He is true to his Mandalorian upbringing, but he's also now eschewed the guild, the bounty hunter guild. He's sort of turned his back on that. He's betrayed them. He's broken the cardinal rule of, asking the questions about, your target and all that kind of stuff. And so, and like you say, it plays well because he's empathizing with this character because he too was abandoned as a child through, because of war, and his parents were killed, and he was adopted by the Mandos and raised and all that kind of stuff. And so it's subtle enough. Like he doesn't. That one of the great things about the show is that the Mando doesn't really talk a lot.
No.
So, but when he does talk, he says meaningful things that are important to move the plot along, or to build his character, or to help create more narrative cohesiveness between the episodes. But he talks a lot about the Mandalorian culture. He talks on and off about his youth, but he never comes out and says, "Well, I'm saving this kid because I was
it's
abandoned."
the right thing to do.
Yeah, he doesn't give us that bullshit trite, speech at the end of some episode. We're like, well, it's the right thing to do and a tasty way to do it. And he gives you the whole beat us, with Wilford Brimley. But the point is, because one of the reasons with the short episodes, one of the things that sort of drives a lot of this is you don't have time for like you say, to sit around and have the big conversations and have the big, arguments or the exposition or whatever on various topics. So there's a little action, there's a little reflection, and then we move on to the next episode. And so far that's serving it. But it's very much, in the line, like you say, of Kung Fu, of Lone Wolf and Cub, of any Clint Eastwood Western. It's the lone hero, the gritty, quiet, silent type that rolls into town and fucks everybody up and then walks away.
Yeah, I mean, and he's definitely not a Mary Sue. I mean, no. I know that term is, and I feel bad even invoking it because it gets overused because I think it gets people's backs up, and it's a term that existed long before Star Wars and it's a Star Trek term because it was from their writer's room. They created it, and it wasn't to pick on anyone of any gender. And just quick shout out, Dorothy Fontana passed away at 85, writer of, so
pour out your 40s for.
Yeah, pour out your 40s for DC Fontana. But that idea that, inexperienced writers will just basically write themselves as a cipher into the story and don't understand about narrative growth, which is the easiest mistake for any writer to make, right, myself included. It's like it's the reason I've never wrote long form. It's hard. It's hard to show growth. So it's not I can kind of understand, but it's also easy to have a Mary Sue in a story if people don't know what it is. They just go, "Oh, well, this character's kick-ass and they're doing stuff." But then I think when you get something, when you have to fill 40, 35, 40 minutes per episode, and I assume that they're going to do, obviously they're filming a second. This is a thing that they're at least going to do 2, maybe 3 seasons. I don't expect it to be a thing where it's going to be like, on the 10th season of The Mandalorian. I don't think that they're going to drag these things out for a long time. I think
Mando blows up the Central Perk.
Yeah, I think that if they can kind of keep it compact and they can keep this guy, like, he gets in, not every fight he's just like, because the first episode you're almost like, oh, he's just kicking ass and taking names and,
he's also dealing with a bunch of a-holes in a bar.
Right.
But then once he gets, there's several times in the series where he gets confronted with something more powerful, gets his ass kicked. He's had to remake his armor twice now.
Right. And it's like, that to me that's where all the deliciousness is, because otherwise you're just kind of, it just becomes a process. It's like,
well, and part of it is, we've talked amongst, our group, the Lounge, about assembling the crew, because we've seen all the marketing for this show with all these different characters, and they come and go in the episodes. We still haven't really assembled the crew, and we don't even really know if there's going to be a crew to be assembled, to be honest. I mean, we just have got a lot of marketing, and I think that there's also potential for these people to hop in and out of episodes and show up and, hang out with him, on a particular quest or whatnot for 2 episodes or 3 episodes and then, go away again. But, the fact is that when he shows up in some of these situations, he needs help. And you see him, the Mandalorian, kind of go through this process where he kind of doesn't think he needs help, and then he kind of realizes he does. And then as you see him over these 5 episodes that have been released, he is more open now to starting from a point of, hey, can you help me? As opposed to just rushing in and being like, I'm the Mando and I'm going to kick everybody's ass. And then, you get run over by an animal, and then people are like, dude, we got to fix your armor. We got to put your shit back together. Like, so you're getting, I mean, we've had 5 episodes at 35 minutes a piece on average. So that's 2.5 hours roughly of television. And so a movie length, almost. And we've seen him, grow from being a cold-hearted killer / bounty hunter to someone who has compassion. We've seen him go from being, I'll do it myself, macho, whatever, I'll kick everybody's ass, to being a person who's humble enough to ask for help. We've seen him go from taking what he needs to asking and having gratitude. And, that's more in 2.5 hours on the Mando in character development of one character than we got in any of the new characters in any of the new prequel movie or sequel movies. Right?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this, and for those of you who haven't listened to our episodes, I highly recommend you go back and listen to the episodes, especially about The Last Jedi. I actually went back and re-listened to it the other day.
All I remember is I probably was a lot nicer to that film.
You were. Yeah. And I was too, actually, to be honest.
Because we want to like Star Wars, but
I actually said Rian Johnson didn't rape my childhood. But no, upon further reflection, I think he did, and it was very, very violent. But the thing is that those characters, and we talked about this in those episodes, is that Finn, for example, has no growth. He goes from one spot to one spot in the Force Awakens, and then he resets and starts over in The Last Jedi. And you're like, okay, so not only did we not have growth, we had regression. Rey has been the same. She's been flatline the whole time. She's the bestest ever, and that's it. Same thing with Poe. He started off with an arc, and then he went sideways. He went from being like a guy who was a noble warrior who was really good at what he did, but he was also a little headstrong. He went from that to being like completely whacked out. Like, I'm gonna start a mutiny because I don't like your purple dress or whatever. And that was all very strange.
And he was and the irony of that is the fact that Poe Dameron was promoted as kind of like the through line between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. That Shattered Empire, which was like a 4 or 5 episode comic series where it established that his mom was a shock trooper, much like Cara Dune.
Uh-huh.
They might have even worked together or something, and I don't think they actually established that in the comics. No. But my point is that his parents were warriors, and they got this force tree, and then they built
from Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, and they built it on Yavin, and this thing. So
yeah,
and just that it's like Poe Dameron almost kind of got caught up in the like kill the past.
Exactly.
So the character that was the closest precedent to the original trilogy is the one that is ranting and raving and like breaking protocol, and he gets demoted because he puts if you look at the through line of that movie, if you just accept what the storytellers are telling you, there's no reason this guy should have ever been in command after that opening sequence. He probably should have spent the entire movie in a brig.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like, he broke ranks, he broke protocol, he committed mutiny, and it's even the fact that the only thing we get is I like him. I like him. I think we did this before,
right? But
it's like,
but still, I mean, but the fact is that we have seen how you can start a character in a certain place and progress them over the course of a series or a film or whatnot into another place, and it's kind of funny. It makes me mad because Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are sitting in the same fucking office that Kathleen Kennedy and all those other people are in the writer's room. They're all sitting down there in an office in California. And why is it that everybody that's come before Favreau and Filoni, hasn't figured this shit out? Dave Filoni is, outside of George Lucas, is responsible for some of the finest Star Wars storytelling of our generation, between the Clone Wars and Rebels and all that stuff. Favreau also has written and or directed or had his hand in production of some of the best of the Marvel franchise. Say what you want. I think Swingers is a seminal film. It's fantastic.
I haven't seen it since it came out, but
I love that movie.
I will say that Iron Man 2 gets better every time I see it, but I still can't stand Cowboys versus Aliens.
Well, okay, so everybody has their one moment, right? But I would rather take a guy like Favreau, who has a lifetime of success and one stinker like Cowboys versus Aliens, than the other way around and have somebody who's about to just makes a bunch of crap Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, I like what he's doing so much that I want Favreau to get on keto, lose some weight.
That's true. We got to keep him around
and
make
sure that he's in a good, stable relationship, so he's not like gonna get Me Too'd,
right?
and he can just ride the wave,
right?
Because it's like I always say, I look at him and I think, God, you kind of look like Brett Ratner a little bit.
Oh, jeez.
But no, I mean, I'm being facetious, but it's like I kind of think it's like I'm not ready to go like, oh, he should be running the whole thing,
right? Because
I honestly feel like TV and movies, it's the cinematic and the televised media, they're very different. And it's like, okay, so this all works on the small screen, but and there is that idea that Lucasfilm has to go, well, how is this going to play in Singapore? How's this going to play in India? How's this going to play in the UK or Germany or whatever? It's like these movies seem to be less of a storytelling things that like, whereas when we were kids, the television was the marketing for the toys, and then eventually they'd make a movie. Well, now I guess the movie is a marketing for the lifestyle brand, and then the TV becomes well, if we don't do this, we're gonna lose all the fans. It's like that weird flip flop. It's like, kind of like that running joke with the sequel trilogy people making, like, you ain't gonna Disney Plus me,
right?
Which in some ways is a slam on Pedro Pascal and all the people in Favreau, and it's like,
you know what? I would rather be Disney Plus right now than be.
I'd rather be sitting back and kind of like enjoying my Christmas as new episodes come out, or filming the new episodes, rather than having to go into those little 5-minute Byron Allen boxes where you have to talk about your movies and pretend that this is the first time anyone's ever asked you what was it like getting the gang back together, just being like, I can't fucking believe I thought when I signed this in 2014 or whatever, or 2013, whenever they signed on, they thought that they were going to be, like writing their own ticket. And now they're probably like, I cannot wait to establish a role outside what I'm doing with Star Wars. I mean, Oscar Isaac is lucky because this is not going to hurt his career once.
No. He's made a lot of really actually good films outside of Star Wars.
Again, if you want to see, if you want to see something, with Pedro Pascal and him, they did a movie called Triple Frontier. Ben Affleck, Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy. I mean, I only make this as a recommend of like, it's not a perfect film, but if you just like, it's like a good, well thought out action thriller, kind of military kind of. If you like Jack Ryan,
right,
you will like Triple Frontier on Netflix, and it's a good chance to see those, the Mando without his helmet. And it's nice and it's another example why Oscar Isaac doesn't really have anything to worry about, however these movies are perceived.
Right.
And the guy, and what's his name, Domhnall Gleeson and Kylo Ren. I mean, those guys make movies all the time. They'll be fine. It's really awesome. It's really Daisy and John that have the most to lose.
Well, especially if John keeps making the Pacific Rim.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he has not had a hit outside of Star Wars, and neither has she.
Well, what was the movie about? There was about the race riots or whatnot.
Detroit. That was on Hulu within a month of it coming out in theaters.
I thought that was very well received. Or is that just more of the Rotten Tomatoes crap?
I don't know. I didn't even follow it. I tend not to watch historical movies. But
what's wrong with you?
I just don't like history movies.
What kind of American are you? Damn, boy.
Because then because I have to spend like 2 days after I enjoy the movie finding out, that person never existed. That person isn't, that person isn't real. Actually, that person did commit this crime. And you're just like, it's like, I saw that Christian Slater, Kevin Bacon movie called Murder in the First when I was like we came out of that movie and we were like, I can't believe this happened. And then we got on and read about it, and it's like, it
didn't actually happen.
Yeah, nothing has happened. But I mean, that's why I kind of avoid historical movies generally. But my point is that, she did that Murder on the Orient Express, and I haven't seen her in anything other than that. So she's got to train for Star Wars, but, I think they're going to have the Mark and Carrie kind of career where it's like Mark, he did Big Red One with
Lee Marvin,
which he's not.
It's a terrible movie.
Well,
it's
I guess
terrible,
I shouldn't say it. I shouldn't
great.
say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it kind of got reinforced the other day when I was watching of all weird things. I was watching John Carpenter's Body Bags, which is like an episodic horror movie with it's got Stacy Keach getting a hair transplant that takes over his body. And the last one is Mark Hamill plays a minor league pitcher who loses his eye in an accident, but they give him an eye transplant of a killer, and he becomes a sex-crazed murderer, and you see his butt. I've seen Mark Hamill's naked ass trying to dry hump a woman in a bed, and I'm still trying to purge that from my mind.
That's what we call Triple Force Friday.
So and then all of a sudden my wife looks over to me and she goes, Mark Hamill's not a really good actor, is he?
No.
And I just go, yeah, he's not. He really isn't. And it kind of peeled away in my mind about all the times that I would try to watch stuff with him in it as a kid and being like, that's Luke Skywalker with his Corvette, or it's
Corvette Summer.
It's Luke Skywalker on the Partridge Family, and it's like, I mean, he's a TV actor. He'd actually be really great on the Mandalorian.
Yeah, they should bring him in.
Actually, I think he might have done an episode. He might have done an episode of Kung Fu, but
he was everywhere.
I guess my point is getting back to this idea is that this all works as a TV show, but I don't think this kind of stuff, I don't think you could scale it to a movie. I don't think it would work at all as a movie. And I think they've painted themselves into this corner of like the movies have to please everyone.
Right.
And then basically the TV show now only has to please enough people.
Subscribers.
The subscribers.
Yeah.
And it's like they're going to probably do the same thing with Obi-Wan, and it's going to be kind of that same level of production, you know. And I will say that I think if you really, having watched it every episode at least twice, it does kind of look cheap. I'm amazed that it costs $10 million an episode or $15 million an episode or something like that is what the rumor was.
Mando?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't spend it on the Sand People costumes.
Yeah, wow, man. Those look like, it kind of look like that Applause rubber-headed one that I got over there. But yeah, it's
like the Saber Guild showed up.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
hey-o.
There's a certain amount. Yeah, there's a certain. I will say, if I'm gonna knock it a little bit, there's a certain cheapness to it all.
Well, you know, I didn't feel or notice the cheapness until Chapter 5.
Well, I think a lot of that is because and this is I don't know how special effects work, but I think they took out like the 4K plates from like the original 4K things, and then they computerized removed like the Dewback and the Stormtrooper or whatever, and then added new people. And so when Mando is walking into the Mos Eisley Cantina, he's walking past the picture that's constantly having its perspective bent a little bit.
Right.
It's like I don't think he was ever on a set. I mean, I don't think he was ever. I don't think they ever went to the desert, or I definitely didn't go to Tunisia. I could be.
Yeah, they didn't go. I don't think they went to Tunisia, but no. But the scenes where, when they're negotiating passage with the Sand People, it just felt like very, Phantom Menace-y. Like they were totally
kind of felt like a Pizza Hut commercial for the Phantom Menace. Like, what's he doing with his hands? He wants a large cheese with extra extra sausage.
Yeah, it's true. Like if it just felt really weird. Like the quality there dropped for a minute. Some of it in the episode was good, but those scenes, some of the dogfight at the beginning felt a little cheap as well. But yeah, I mean, other than that,
I mean, it's not distracting, but being a person that has spent a good number of my 20s and 30s absolutely steeped in kind of mid-level budget genre television back before everything was genre. Right. It's like you were basically, if you wanted to watch something that wasn't like, Ross and Rachel, you had Deep Space Nine, and then you had
Truth.
Then you'd watch your 2-pack on Saturday of Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, which it was all right. I was more of a Xena fan, and Xena had that level of, or even like later on Stargate SG-1. I mean, I would say the Mandalorian sometimes reminds me of Stargate SG-1.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a little bit the cheesiness, the idea of like when the episode 4 when they go to the fishing village and it's just everybody's wearing costumes that's like peasant central casting.
Oh yeah.
We're just simple people that we collect little blue sardines. It's like we're just my grandfather.
Blue smelt.
My grandfather seeded these things as I wear. It's like they're all wearing like costumes that, if you go look at clips from
any episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where we wind up on a developed world that doesn't have star travel yet,
or the costumes that everybody wears in Waterworld, and it's like that very
Waterworld. Oh my god, yeah.
There is a certain cheapness to it that I was a little surprised for the idea of what they were going to spend spend. Now, and I don't know if they spent a lot of money on casting. I mean, I love Carl Weathers, but I don't think he's like an A-list tier kind of guy.
No, he's not getting premium pricing.
And Nick Nolte, much to people's chagrin, is like, that is not Nick Nolte in that Ugnaught outfit. That is a voice.
Right.
They just have some little guy in that thing.
Who looks a lot like Nick Nolte.
Yeah, he just sits there, and they probably did a face cast.
I have spoken.
They put like cold cuts on Nick Nolte's face, and then like let him dry, and then made the mask. I'm not putting fucking algae.
It's a salami life mask.
I'm not putting on one of those things where they put it on your face and they put straws up your fucking nose.
I have spoken.
That's probably what it came from. They're like, it's like, I'm having deviled ham for lunch. I have spoken. Nick Nolte has spoken. Bring me deviled ham or you won't get your lines. I saw him in that.
Holding out for ham.
I saw him in that, it's him and Robert Redford did a version of A Walk in the Woods, the Bill Bryson book where he walks the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man. Nick's looking rough, man. He's just like, there ain't a bottle he don't like the taste of, and there ain't a sandwich he ain't gotten a bite off of.
Hell yeah.
And it's just like, whoa. But
it's good work if you can get it.
It's good to have him there. I mean, I love that Werner Herzog is in there, man. That is so weird for me, especially like considering that I remember years ago he made a movie called The Big Blue, I think, with Brad Dourif, and what it was he used NASA like footage, like extra footage of like scientific footage, and he recontextualized it into a kind of a low budget sci-fi movie.
Oh, okay.
It's very, very, we're talking micro budget, where Brad Dourif does a lot of the exposition just talking about being, he's an alien who's taken on human form, I think. But I was watching this is when the DVD came out, so I watched all the extras, and he's like, or the commentary, and it's like, I've never seen a Star Wars movie, nor would I ever waste my time on such crap.
Nice.
And so he had
Get there, son.
Werner Herzog went from being like, I've never seen a Star Wars, to bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree? Actually, I think I sound a little bit like Christoph Waltz, actually. I
was going to say, yeah.
And it's not working.
Suddenly I'm Inspector.
Yeah, it's like, oh, absolutely. Let me ask you a question. Sorry, I watched Alita Battle Angel last night, so I'm more Waltz than Herzog right now. But it's such a weird... I mean, he did show up in, of all things, Jack Reacher a few years ago. I mean, he kind of is a character in some of his own films, so I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but it was just the idea of like, really? Star Wars? Where is that? I mean, I assume that there's the idea of like this Hollywood glad handing thing. That's how Brian Posehn ends up in as the ice driver in the first episode, and Horatio Sands is the blue alien and stuff. So it's a lot of, and then later on episodes, we're going to see Bill Burr, comedian Bill Burr. Bill Burr!
Jesus.
That's what he does on his own podcast when he does one microphone podcast. I assume showing up, Ming-Na Wen for, I assume she's done. Taika Waititi was the IG-11. God, who else showed up that was kind of a surprise? I don't think there hasn't been. I keep on meaning to go look up some of these names of like who's doing the voice of the armorer in.
Oh right, yeah.
If they're like big name people, but
well, one of the things I found interesting is that Favreau does the voice of the heavy weapons guy.
Yeah,
but it's interesting because if you look at the character name, he's a Vizsla.
Oh, and he played Pre-Vizsla.
He played Pre-Vizsla in the Clone Wars.
And I was not very charitable towards his use of a voice in the cartoon. I will say, I remember specifically saying, like, why is Favreau on that? He's terrible. He sticks out like a sore thumb, but, whatever. I guess I'm being finicky.
Well, maybe, I don't know, his voice for the character in Solo was probably even more worse, right?
Oh, Ardennian roast or whatever. Yeah. I forgot he was
You've never known the joy of whatever is sitting in the lap of a Wookiee or whatever. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of seems like that's kind of like the precursor of like how much fan service you're going to see in that from just his scenes in Solo. But yeah, I will say that it makes me wonder, like, how long can they coast on the fan? I'm not that they're coasting, but how long will the fan service stuff? Because I definitely heard a lot of pushback on this episode specifically. It was like, because people are never happy. A little too much fan service in the 5th episode of The Mandalorian. The bloom is off the rose. There's like, there was pit droids and this and that, and oh boy. It's like, really? Criticism's fine, and I'm not trying to like make you can only criticize it one way, but it's kind of like, well, I think we've found that unfortunately some of the X factor about Star Wars is that fan service and callbacks are super important.
They're very important.
I just want to stop in here and say callbacks are very important to this story, Mark.
True facts.
But I think there is that kind of, yes, is it a cheap entertainment? Yeah, but it's in a multi-dimensional narrative that spans 41 years, and we're not David Foster Wallace. You can't put an asterisk and you go to the back of the book and read about it. So they have to have some way to kind of telegraph it to the fans and make it interesting, and make, when they add these things like, say, pit droids or a super battle droid or the weird cross beam, maybe on some level there'll be people that will be like, it'll just go right over their heads and they won't care, and that's fine. There's people that have been with it the whole time that'll get their brains all tingling or whatever. And then there'll be other people that'll go like, well, I want to know more about this. I want to go deeper on some of this stuff. Right. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, one of the I don't know if it's a treat for me, but I don't speculate about this show at all. I don't have any expectation what's going to happen with Baby Yoda. I don't care if he ever takes off the mask or if he takes it off in the next one. It's kind of like, it's refreshing. Whereas, like, I have gone into these, I went into episode 8, and again, I won't go into a big tirade, but that was the first one I ever went in with, like, well, maybe episode 1, when that was coming out, I was in anxiety. Oh, well, is this going to be different? And then I had to deal with the idea, yes, it was different, but it was something else, and no, it's not as good as what I had as a kid, but, something, ultimately, I enjoyed it. And then I did it again. Actually, at Force Awakens, I was pretty sure I was going to enjoy that. I didn't have a lot of trepidation, and then the trepidation started with 8. And so I did kind of go in with that, like, with my new attitude about Star Wars, I literally have no expectations at the time, because it's like, you are just going to, So I don't want to speculate about who's who. I mean, I could, but it's kind of like the story, I don't know where it's going, and I'm kind of like, okay with that.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's because usually when I see the movies that come out, and I'm like, oh, what's this going to happen? And I got to read the book that fills in the spot to that. And I got to know Labyrinth of Evil, which was like between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, where like the 8 different ways from Sunday that they introduced the General Grievous character, which is weird.
Well, yeah, they did it in the Clone Wars cartoon once, and then they did it in a book, and
then they did it in the Clone Wars cartoon again, and none of them actually match up.
True facts.
But the one thing I will say, it's because it doesn't entirely match, but I think this is a good thing, is kind of, in my estimation, about kind of making the Mandalorian as an idea, make it more, I feel like in these 5 episodes, it's made the idea of the Mandalorian more interesting to me than it ever has, even in the Clone Wars era, because it's like I need to go back and watch those again, and I remember, but most of that stuff was kind of like drawn out. It was that kind of prequel, taxations of the trade. It's drawn out. It gets a little dry, gets a little bogged down in exposition. Whereas now it's like everything you need to know about the Mandalorians kind of gets shown in these episodes. You don't need to have seen the pre-Vizsla. You don't need to know about Sabine. You don't even need to know about Boba Fett or the fact that because it's going to be more and more the fact, I think, what they're going to say, because they never once refer to, in the verbiage of the actual movies, Boba Fett is a Mandalorian. They never say, they just call Jango Fett a bounty hunter. They call a bounty hunter named Jango Fett. They don't go a Mandalorian bounty hunter. It's not even really brought up. So they've kind of quickly been able to establish this idea that they are able to have a different level of engagement and still wear the armor.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the not having to watch the original shows like in the Clone Wars and whatnot about all the Mando culture, and the whole thing about Boba Fett not being referred to as a Mandalorian. But it's interesting that you go back, if you have consumed that material, and if you have watched the Clone Wars. The interesting thing about how the Mandalorians are portrayed in that series is that they are a culture in transition, and that they are trying to move away from their warrior roots. And so there's a lot of and whatever politics of the show or whatever, but it's there's a civil war that goes on pre-Vizsla and all that, and how he tries to overthrow. I guess what was her name? Satine, yeah, Duchess Satine, Obi-Wan's girlfriend. Yeah. So
I thought I wasn't supposed to have a girlfriend, but then again, I'd never thought I'd be on a Disney Plus series.
Whoa.
That is good news.
Good news. Oh, jeez. But the whole thing is that, so you got this culture that used to be this warrior race, and then the Death Watch went and moved and lived on this moon, and there was all this stuff and this inter-Mandalorian politics. And so it's interesting that this show now, the way that they're portraying the Mandalorians is that they're a culture in exile because of the Purge and because of the war of Mandalore, which I'm assuming we're going to get in the new season 7 of Clone Wars, which is going to be the finale.
Okay.
Right? So I remember they announced that at Celebration a while back. There was so they're going to finally finish the Clone Wars the appropriate way, and it's going to be the whole thing. But it's the Battle of Mandalore, so it's going to be,
that'll be interesting.
Yeah, so it'll probably all tie in because that's what we do here at Disney. But the thing though is it's kind of cool that the culture in exile, but it feels like when they keep talking about it is the way. And it is the way, and then not removing the helmets and all that stuff. It feels like they're going back to, or they're trying to return to the warrior roots of the Mandalorian culture. And the whole thing, it's funny. I've read some things online and seen some, videos on YouTube, and people are like, well, this whole thing about not taking off the helmet, that's crap, because look at everything in all the shows like Rebels and Clone Wars, everybody's taking their helmets off. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe that was part of it's the reaction to a lot of this in the trying to recapture the core element of the warrior race or whatever, and how they've become almost like fundamentalists in a way.
Right.
Like there's been too much reform, too much easy living or whatever. So now we're going to go back to be fundamentalist Mandalorians.
So
they're going to be warriors.
They're literally the Taliban now.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But I mean, it's an interesting thing because I see these people trying to nitpick this crap, and they're like, oh, well, it's not like, but it makes sense the way it's being described or the way it's being portrayed in the show. It makes sense. Like they are trying to recapture this way of living and way of being, but they're doing it underground, and I don't know, and it's it makes sense. It doesn't seem out of place or weird, and this whole thing about I heard another thing where someone was complaining about how they're talking about taking the helmet off, and it says the lady who's the smith, she says something about, have you ever taken your Sorry about that.
A little technical thing.
Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for returning to your regularly scheduled program. So anyway,
don't you agree?
So the whole thing with the Smith lady and how she's talking about have you ever taken your helmet off, or and he says no, not, and he says that it's never been taken off or whatever. And I think that's the big thing. It's the deal is not, you can remove the helmet, you can remove it, yourself, and when you're by yourself, but the big thing is not having your enemy take it off of you. And then there's the whole thing in the show where the lady tries to take the helmet off and give him smooches or whatever, and he's just like, nope. We don't do that shit because Ramando's.
Well, and that's the thing. I feel like in just 5 episodes, they've kind of been able to rehabilitate the concept of the Mandalorians in Star Wars that I've always found confusing. And I one time referred to this, the thing is like Boba Fett as a character, because they were still talking about, Michael B. Jordan, is he going to come in and play Boba Fett? They want him for the Boba Fett movie. I mean, we're talking Josh Trank era because they're buddies. And I kind of was like, I was down with that because they had this idea that they were going to kill. I don't even know where I remember this theory. I think it was like Rebel Force Radio or something. They had talked about, one of the guys had said he had this way through is like, what they really need to do is they need to take basically Daniel Logan's version that whatever, he still thinks he's Boba Fett even though he played him as a kid and then as a cartoon. The idea that he still thinks that they were going to make a movie with him starring in it. It's like, that's not going to happen. Yeah. But they were going to basically kill off the Boba Fett that was the son of Jango Fett, or the clone of Jango Fett, and they were going to replace him with Michael B. Jordan. And I don't even think that this actually went that far. But I called like Boba Fett essentially was like the English bulldog of the Star Wars thing. It's so genetically screwed up. It'd be better just to let the character die, because they've never been able to, they introduced it when we were 4 or 5 years old as this in the Christmas special, which is, again, still the only part that they actually deemed worthy enough to actually recreate, and it's available on Blu-ray with the box set. You can actually watch that part.
Oh, the cartoon.
The Melvana cartoon. Or Nelvana or whatever. But then later on, of course, it didn't pay off, and then he just gets, and every time you watch Jedi, it's like, oh my God, he just gets shot out of a cannon into the Sarlacc's asshole or whatever. But that's its mouth.
Cartoon,
that's its mouth. But then it's like,
I've been to Singapore. That's not a mouth, okay?
So then George tries to create this weird narrative, go through and thread through by adding him into episode 4. So it's like, he's in actually all the Star Wars movies retroactively.
Right.
It doesn't quite work, and then and you think, well, okay, and then he tries to. You think he's going to show up in episode 1, and he doesn't. And then episode 2, you finally get the payoff, and then you're like, oh man, that was kind of. I don't know if I really like that. It is a lot of weird fan service of like, I bumped my head, so I'm a klutz in real life, just like all the stormtroopers are klutzes. Instead of like going like, well, let's do this character right. George made the mistake of like, well, that'll explain why that one guy back in Elstree in 1975 bumped his head, and I was so freaked out about getting done before tea time that I didn't do a second take. Right. And it's always irked me because I've tried to fix it in the computer 10 times and it doesn't work, so I have to stick with it, which is really probably what he ended up doing. So my point is that, it's all about the subtlety. So like, I don't really remember a lot about what Sabine said about being a Mandalorian. I mean, I knew there was the Darksaber and that whether who was worthy to carry it and all this stuff. And she kept saying, no, I'm not. And then she gave it to somebody else, or her mother or somebody, or a sister. I forget how it ended. And I really don't remember a lot about the Clone Wars except the Satine and the Pre-Vizsla part. And so I guess my point is that as much as Dave Filoni and George sat down and came up with this beautiful, rich history, this Star Wars fan, it never even really registered as something to remember. Whereas this one is way better because it's just very simple. It's like, well, okay, I can gather it's an honor-based thing. Mm-hmm. It's, we've seen this, not that they're trying to say a big thing about human life, but we've seen examples of this. Warrior cultures that have been ghettoized, where they end up becoming bounty hunters, or they're not respected, or they have to hide, or they're mocked. And it's like, even going back to a movie like Tim Morrison was in, Once Were Warriors, and they talked about Maoris and kind of where they were at in that movie. It's like, we were warriors once, and now we're just kind of sitting around trying to figure out what we're going to do with ourselves.
Right.
So there's definitely precedence in the thing, and it's very interesting. You don't have to get into it to be like, have you touched the book of so-and-so? And then on the third level, it says that a Mandalorian does this, and then you have to explain it all. And it's very subtle, and it's very... you don't have to be a person that enjoys action movies or has watched, 3 seasons of the Clone Wars to understand, like, this is very important to him. This is very important that he doesn't lose a battle. He doesn't, he doesn't exploit people, but when he's on a quarry or whatever and he's doing his bounty hunter thing, that he has to do what he has to do.
Right.
But so far, most of the people we only saw him catch one bounty ahead of time. It's like you kind of get the feeling that guy was asking for whatever ended up for him. So there is implied he had a morality anyway.
Right.
And it's like, I don't go after people unless they start shooting me. It's like those guys were harassing him and stuff, and he was going to let it go until they kind of closed around him. And then he was like, all right, well...
self-defense at that point.
And then he was just going to drag that guy back through the doorway, and then he pulled a gun on him. And he was, well, now you're going to get cut in half.
Right. Now I'm going to slice you up.
Yeah, so it's like you can see that this is like an honor-based culture, and you don't need him to go, I'm in an honor-based culture. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's obvious.
Right.
And people understand, the characters understand it, which is a nice touch, because... unfortunately, one of the things you kind of get from Disney these days is, and I guess I don't really blame Disney, it's the Joss Whedoning of entertainment, is that everything is ironic, that any kind of narrative depth, anything that might be kind of complex emotionally or deal with, like we're creating a culture here in our show. They have to diffuse it by saying, like, well, who died and made you the head Mandalorian?
Right.
That kind of stuff. Because if a guy like a Joss Whedon or anybody that thinks that that's a great way to tell a story, if they had just thrown this out there to, like, even like maybe a Lord Miller, there'd be this self-conscious idea of, like, I'm just a guy trying to make it through the galaxy, but not like, I like the Jango Fett. And I appreciate that. For the most part, the characters, when they're saying things, you get the idea that they believe it. Whereas kind of in the sequel era, a lot of the comic relief begs the question is like, is this character still in a Star Wars movie? Because it's like, you're almost waiting for them to go like, oh, I'm getting so tired of all these Star Wars. It's kind of like when Zephyr Cochrane says in First Contact, like, so you tell me you guys are on a Star Trek, and you're just like,
that was the worst self-referential thing ever.
Yeah, and that
was terrible.
And I'm kind of waiting.
And that's probably one of the best movies.
Yeah,
First Contact is one of the best Star Trek
and
movies.
Even when they
ruin that,
when they're doing it right, they can't stick the landing because they had. Well, of course, that was the 90s. I guess I don't know what year that came out, but my point is that people will go with this as long as you make your characters believe. I mean, if I'm being honest, on my subsequent rewatch of Episode 5, which I think we would agree has probably so far been the weakest of the 5, maybe tied with the 4th one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the biggest... The conversation that we were having, offline about this was that it feels like at the end of the 5th chapter, we have this mystery character show up with the dead, where the dead lady is.
Yeah.
And it felt like the entire episode was 33 and a half minutes of filler to get to the reveal that there's somebody tracking the Mando.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, you could have thrown that in at the end of the last episode and give me another 30 minutes of whatever, but the two things that stood out that in that episode or the fifth episode, whatever.
Oh, I guess, yeah, they call them chapters.
Yeah, they're called chapters, whatever. It's fine. The special effects / costuming felt a little cheap in this episode, and the guy who was the up and coming bounty hunter guy, or whatever, he was terrible.
I was gonna the casting, such a bad, and it's funny too because I actually really enjoyed the Amy Sedaris character. I don't know, are you familiar with Amy Sedaris? She was the one that ran the hangar. She was. Oh yeah. She was. Did you ever watch Strangers with Candy? It's like, I was a user, a boozer, and a loser. That's her.
Oh, my God.
She's Jerry Blank.
Okay.
So now Jerry Blank is canon.
I didn't even, Jerry Blank is canon. I didn't even make that connection. Sorry.
Yeah, she doesn't look like herself in the thing. She's at first I thought it was Tracy Ullman.
That resonated. Yeah.
But yeah, that guy, the bounty, that guy was so out of like Disney Central casting. He's got an earring.
That's so Raven.
Yeah, it's just like he literally looks. It's kind of like, again, back to Alita Battle Angel. So I was watching that last night, and it's directed by Robert Rodriguez, and there's a character in the thing that's kind of like the love interest for Alita, and literally in different sequences. If you've ever seen any of the behind the scenes of Robert Rodriguez, he loves to film his behind the scenes and put it on the DVD. Well, he's probably since the 90s he's been wearing like a do-rag over his head. I don't know if it's either cover his hair or he just likes to wear hats. But the character in the movie was wearing the fucking do-rag that he wears, and it kind of looked like him. And I'm like, you just put yourself in the fucking movie.
Yeah, why don't you just get in the movie, dude?
Just get in the movie. And it was kind of like that character. Just skip
all the pretense and just get
and
there.
That character stuck this young, like, I'm going to get my guild card. And it's just like he kept talking about it and like, hey, I should thank you. You're helping me get my guild card. And it's just like, this isn't going to work out for this kid. It's like the whole story was a foregone conclusion. I mean, again, it was a nice homage to a lot of Star Wars stuff. I will say that it probably counts as, because a lot of shows do this, that they'll always do that episode. Like, what was the character doing 6 months before the first episode?
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of like that, because it's like generally because the Baby Yoda thing, which we haven't even really talked about, the Baby Yoda thing is such a not part of this story. Actually, it hasn't been really part of the last two, but except as a plot device. But the whole idea that, this is what a bounty hunter does, and this is the kind of thing. I mean, he kind of was in a position where he needed money. So I guess at first you're like, why is he helping this idiot who obviously is out of his depth? Because he realized he was going to get some money, and he needed money to fix the damn ship. But other than that, it added nothing to it, because it's not like the Ming-Na Wen character was like, had been previously established or anything like that. I mean, I guess if you call it another thing, it's a cameo, because essentially that's, I think she played Mulan. Wasn't she the voice of Mulan? So it's like, the Mando versus a Disney princess kind of situation. I mean, I don't know if they were really trying to do that, but it's kind of like, I guess I'm actually, when I'm talking about casting, as much as I do like, I liked Cara Dune, I realized that I'm blanking on her name.
MMA girl?
Yeah, the MMA girl. It's not her strongest performance, although it's, again, a lot of the stuff she's saying, it's kind of like very much like just telling people to line up for a battle. So it wasn't like she didn't have a lot of it's just like, he's like, you gotta listen to her because she fought with the rebels, and then she's like, yeah, we all need to stand here and do this and do that, and I'm tough. And it's like, okay, you're just setting us up for the next thing. But it's like, I don't know. It's an interesting character. I kind of hope she's going to show up and do some more, but
yeah, she's coming back.
I was a little unsatisfied with some of her stuff. The fight was okay.
Well, I think the fighting was fine. I mean, clearly that's what she's done, right? That's her. that's her skill set. That's, being a professional fighter, and now she's, fighting on screen, so it didn't feel awkward or weird or out of place. She is scheduled to appear in 3 episodes.
Okay.
So she will be back. I don't know exactly. I know I'll probably be in the finale, but I don't know what the other appearance will be. But so we're going to see her again, and my hope is that her acting didn't seem bad or out of place or wooden or weird or anything but like you say, she wasn't given any dialogue in that episode that would, I don't know, require any heavy acting.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was a little weird where it's like, I did like the fact that they kind of established, maybe the New Republic is just another bunch of assholes running things kind of thing.
Which, is very clear in the sequel trilogy. Yeah,
that's just like, because they didn't even deign any opportunity to explain the power political structure of the universe after that time. They tried, but it's like you basically see the people and then they're dead. There were some sequences apparently in The Force Awakens where Leia was conversing via telecommunication to one of the characters that gets blown up, who actually appeared in one of the books. But it introduces Leia way too early in the movie. It's like it's kind of a surprise when she just shows up after the Maz Kanata castle thing. Right. And it's like, an hour into the movie. And so, because JJ loves his mystery box. He couldn't think of it. It's either like, I guess we better not introduce Princess Leia and then not have her do anything for an hour. It's like, maybe. But, yeah, I don't know. It's the only other movie I've seen, oh, God, I'm blanking on her name again. Anyway, Cara Dune's character, I saw her in this Steven Soderbergh movie called Whiplash.
Okay.
That I actually recommend for people. It's kind of he does these kind of low budget action movies now, or thrillers, and it's her and like Bill Paxton plays her dad in some parts. Antonio Banderas is in it.
Wow.
It's like she basically is like an agent that goes on missions, and she gets double-crossed, and she gets to do the MMA stuff, and she gets to get in actually a much better fight with oh God, who's the guy that played Duke in the new G.I. Joe?
Magic
Mike, yeah. They have like a hand-to-hand, which is actually a much better fight than the one between the Mando. But one thing that people are always like, of course, the nerds had to go, she's not legit. Mando would have kicked her ass and all that. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. But you also have to notice in that episode, it becomes painfully obvious that Pedro Pascal is not particularly mobile in that uniform.
No, it's not a good costume for that.
He gingerly has to kind of walk over the patties with the fish.
Yes, I noticed that.
And he was kind of like, I got to keep my balance.
Could I talk to you for a second as I fall over?
As whoops, I weigh 400 pounds. And it's not a situation where you're going to get convincing action, hand-to-hand action with an unarmored person at the same time. It's just going to look phony. And it's kind of like, whatever. Again, that's kind of plays into the cheapness, my feelings that there is some kind of cost cutting going on here. It's like, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I'm trying to explain the concept of what I'm saying, and I'm not articulating it well. Anyway, we'll change the topic.
Okay. So, a couple of things. I want to jump back to our conversation about Mandalorian culture, and you were talking about Boba and Jango Fett.
Mm-hmm.
Jango Fett, sorry.
Jango!
Unchained Fett. George Lucas talked about this, and people have picked up on it and have been talking about, I guess, the relation of Boba Fett and Jango Fett to the Mandalorian culture and Mandalorians in general and all that stuff. And the the prevailing wisdom on this is that Jango Fett was not a Mandalorian, and that he had either knockoff or stolen Mandalorian armor and was using it as sort of, I don't know if it was an intimidation piece or if it was some kind of calling card or whatever as a bounty hunter and as a killer to intimidate people, but he did not live the code, and neither did Boba Fett. And so while if you follow the chronology, basically Boba Fett being the first Mandalorian, quote unquote, that we see, he's lumped in with all that and considered to be this, really cool character, and everybody loves Boba Fett and all this stuff. But turns out that he and his father are frauds when it comes to Mandalorian culture and whatnot. And there's comments that have been made. I believe in the Clone Wars there was talk about Boba Fett, or about Jango Fett, sorry.
Right.
Like Vizsla makes comments about him he's not a true Mandalorian and all these things, and he has the armor, but he's not a so it's interesting. Like you say, we're getting all of this backstory in this culture, and we're getting all these updates and all this stuff, but it's independent of, and it's actually sort of despite what we may or may not know based on our exposure to Jango and Boba. The other thing is, anyway, sorry, I was just thinking about the whole armor and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I mean, it's just that
because Boba Fett's always been referred to as Mandalorian armor,
right? But not
he was never referred to as a Mandalorian. Yeah, so anyway, that's just one of those
and that's the
things.
thing. They've tried so many times to try to explain it. It's like back in the original Marvel comics, there was the Fen Sasha. Remember that? The whole there was a Mandalorian that showed up. I can't remember if it was pre or I think it might have been post Empire.
Okay.
So post Jedi. So the post Jedi Marvel comics, they had they lived in some weird bone world. It was made out of a skeleton. It's on the cover.
Oh wow! Okay.
And there was a Mandalorian character that apparently was a bounty hunter, and his name was Fen Sasha, and he wore the armor, and he took the armor off and stuff like that. And then I remember the name, but I don't actually remember anything about the story because I saw somebody in our group put the toy up on the Jodo cast, which was another Mandalorian armored character, and I think that might have been a Dark Horse kind of thing. It's it's interesting. It's like they've been trying to tell this story, and I don't know if that's because they just didn't know what to do with it. Did they want to be? Because I remember, if you go into the annotated screenplays or some of the stuff where they talk about the stuff that George had been working on for, some of his story ideas or his treatments. He talked a bit about, that the clones were going to be the Mandalorians were going to be the clones from the Clone Wars, or that the clones fought the Mandalorians in the Clone Wars, and that became this whole thing, and that the whole thing became is it right for us to clone Jedi so we can have Jedi-powered clones? And it's like, what? So it's not the first time that they've tried to tell this story in some of the more low impact ancillary material, just kind of flesh out a backstory. But it's I think it would behoove them not to pin too much down. I mean, I think they're doing fine right now, but I don't think they need to have and this is how a Mandalorian eats, and this is what a Mandalorian likes, and Mandalorians can only do this. I mean, as long as you kind of keep it okay, well, now we know he can't take the helmet off. So they're trying to maybe do a little bit of the, people gave the people that made that movie the Judge Dredd, the second one with Carl Urban, because Carl Urban never takes his helmet off. And even chides another judge in the first part because she takes her helmet off. And stuff. So it's like people kept remarking over and over how cool it was. Like because Dredd, I guess, never takes his helmet off in the comics.
No, you never see Judge Dredd without his helmet in the comics.
Right, and Stallone takes his helmet off like in the first 15 minutes when he played Judge Dredd. So
and then that's true. But then also the whole story was that he was stripped of his judgeship and he was sent off, and so he lost the armor. Yeah,
but in the first 5 minutes, he literally just comes back to the gym and they're all hanging out, and he takes his helmet off and teaches a class just in his regular outfit. You get this if you graduate. If you can make it, and then you got the Book of Law.
The Book of the Law.
But it's it's that idea, like, you can't go wrong with, again, like you were saying with the Lone Wolf and Cub, the idea, the Bushido Code, the Ronin, even though it's not the thing, it's like, it's not like his master died and he's disgraced. It's that the Mandalorians or Mandalore or whatever, which they don't really, did they resolve that in the comic? Or are we just supposed to assume that something has happened between the end of the Clone Wars and the end of the Empire that has sent the Mandalorians to the corners of the galaxy?
Yeah, so I don't know how well it's been fleshed out, but they refer to it's called like the Purge or the something along those lines. I believe the Purge is the right term, where and I don't know if it was before the Empire or
there was some rebel stuff.
Right. Well, but the conversation was that during the Clone Wars, they kept trying to get the Mandalorians to come in on the side of the Republic.
Right.
And the Death Watch guys were kind of like, F all y'all, because, we're warriors. We're not going to bow down to anybody. So, screw the Separatists, screw the Republic. We're our own animal. And it wound up causing some problems. And I know that, like, the Death Watch guys were fighting against the Jedi and the clones there for a minute. And so I don't know how it ultimately wound up shaking out, because then they had their own civil war. And I think that we're going to probably see it in season 7 of Clone Wars, like what actually happened. But the inference is that something happened to Mandalore whereby there was an occupation and or pogrom, I guess, against the warriors there, and that whoever was left or whoever survived that kind of had to go out in hiding. And I don't know if it's, like, for example, the group that the Mandalorian is with on the planet in the show, if that's one clan or if it's members of multiple clans that are hiding out together. But it is very much, there's a diaspora of Mandalorians, and they're not necessarily all together, but they are hiding out in their groups. And I think that this also helps. It helps kind of with this reset of the culture, because this particular group that he is with might be different than another group of Mandalorians and how they're preserving their culture and interpreting, like each group is responding to this in a different way. And so, you have some independence and some freedom there with the storytelling, where you could say things like, if another group of Mandalorians showed up, for example, and they have their own way, and, like, well, this is the way, well, this is our way, like, kind of stuff. So, the writers are in this series, if Favreau steps away, say for season 2 or whatever, but the writers in this series will have it's their own, ability to develop and be free with that. But yeah, it hasn't been officially laid out in canon yet what exactly happened, but there's been a lot of references to the fact that the Empire came and pretty much just kicked the shit out of the Mandalorians for whatever they did or didn't do during the Clone War on behalf of the Republic. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that kind of... They could go in so many different directions because, like I said, I think that it wouldn't, even though season 7 of the Clone Wars will maybe make this more complex, dishing it out in small doses and just enough for the audience, especially those people. I assume most people, this is the first time they've ever watched a Star Wars television show. It's kind of, and this is the first time I've I guess I did watch Rebels, so we watched it for the show, but I kind of always think animated, and I always kind of denigrate that for some reason. It's like, oh, well, maybe it's a throwback to the old George level canon and the movie canon and the comic canon now that they want to just, it's all one canon until it's not, a kind of attitude.
Right, yeah.
It's like I just kind of, live action trumps animation or something. But, yeah, it's the thing where I remember they said something like, we have to only go out one at a time. And it's like, well, I kind of stick as really, some of you guys look kind of just like Boba Fett, and some of you guys look very similar, but some of you people look vastly different. Do you really think that you could go out and be like, wait, you're 6'5" and 400-pound armor guy?
Right.
When there was a skinny guy out here last week. Wait, there's more than one Mandalorian out here? It's like, I understand they're just trying to get get to the end result of them all showing up at the end of the episode. But it was this kind of thing. I was like, what planet is this? It's like you got Mandalorians hanging out there. You got old Imperials hanging out there. It's like, wow, what's going on here? In some ways, I'm really glad that they don't bog the story down and trying to go, I hope the New Republic does this, and I hope this, and I heard that Leia is going to do that, and I heard there's a Jedi now, and that kind of, although I won't be shocked if they do that kind of stuff, because they are kind of heavily milking this idea of being oh, here's another thing from this. Remember the Mos Eisley Cantina, which, as you've noticed, Mos Eisley Cantina, people talk about automation ruining jobs. Well, Wurr's obviously out of a freaking job now. It's they just using robots to serve drinks, technically, I guess Wurr was just a bartender there.
Right.
He didn't own it. Who is it that actually owns it? It's that B. Arthur character from the...
Oh, yeah, from the
Amika or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah. Actually, no, isn't it the canon that some alien owns the Mos Eisley Canteen? I don't know.
I have no idea.
It seemed very different, this version of it. The geography...
It was less full.
Yeah, it was definitely less. It was
better lit.
Better lit. Again,
the smoking ban was in, so
no vaping.
No vaping in there, so it was not cloudy. It definitely felt like there wasn't as much business in there.
And maybe that's just the economic downturn of Tatooine,
That's right.
It's kind of basically...
The moisture evaporator market collapse, so...
Yeah, And see, that's the confusion. So in the first and second episodes, when the Mandalorian was, having his issue with the Jawas. So I guess now Jawas have gone worldwide or whatever.
Oh man, I wish you guys at home could have seen that. That was great.
Jawa worldwide.
Jawa worldwide.
It's so now they.
Hey.
When I saw they said when I was at GameStop and I saw that they literally just had a box on a toys marked off-world Jawas.
Right. Well, because they have different colored cloaks.
No, I guess
they have different colored eyes.
And so that was the
green eyes.
Yeah, it was do their eyes change after they leave Tatooine? Are they I thought they were always indigenous to Tatooine.
See, I thought they were too, but apparently, if you have red eyes and a gray outfit, you can be on another planet. But if you have gold eyes and brown outfits, you're on Tatooine.
Yeah, and that was a little thing. I definitely liked that whole idea that it kind of reminded me of the episode of the Marvel Comics when I think it's called Return to Tatooine, And it's early on in the Archie Goodwin era when like Luke actually goes back to Tatooine and runs into some people from the olden days.
Right.
And then they get back, and I think their speeder has been completely dismantled by Jawas. And then they have to get, I think they actually, I can't remember how, I might be compressing a few comics, but I think there was an episode, or was it, and then there was an episode of, an issue of the comic book where I think, wasn't it like Boba Fett got pulled out of the Sarlacc or got spit out, and then the Jawas grab him thinking he's a robot, and he's sitting in the hole, and he wakes up and like takes off or something.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've read through all the old Marvel comics, but there's been several storylines where he was either rescued from the Sarlacc pit or he was undigestible and was spit out. There's a couple of different versions of that. So,
yeah, I definitely enjoyed that, even though I was kind of, by that first episode, I was like, man, this is legit. Like they're gonna think. But by the second one, like when he's disintegrating these Jawas, like, and they're just like. And like nobody, like they don't even seem to give a shit. They're like, "Yeah, life's cheap when you're a Jawa, when you're an off-world Jawa."
That's right.
And all they wanted was like a little bit of like,
they wanted some
egg beaters or whatever from outer space egg beaters.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was very interesting.
I thought it was like at first I thought it was like what do they call it? A reek or whatever. One of the creatures from episode 2 in the Geonosian.
It's very close to it.
Yes. Oh no, that's the cat.
That's the cat one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and there was a Loth cat in.
Yes, the Loth cat
from Rebels is like shown up in episode 4, and it's like, I guess we've been beating around the bush. We probably should directly kind of. I'm sure the real reason people came to hear about the Mandalorian, and we should be talking about the Baby Yoda character, the thing that gets the ladies to watch. I guess
the yodeling.
The yodeling, is that what they were calling it? Yodeling.
That's something I stumbled across on the internet the other day. Because in Star Wars they refer to children as younglings.
Actually, the only people that ever refers to them is it's only referred to in that one movie though, where he goes like, "I saw a security hologram of him killing younglings."
Right.
No, did you ever hear that old skit with Jimmy Fallon? No. I was at a bar doing an open mic. And it's a Chinese restaurant. It's called Younglings. I was killing. I was doing my open mic.
There was another one.
I know. So I can't believe I quoted Jimmy Fallon.
No, there's another meme going around that after that film where it's I saw the security film of him killing many younglings, and he's got a case of Yingling beer.
Yes,
he's like, and he's got the bottle in his hand. I was killing many younglings. Anyway. But so anyway, that's the thing I saw. So because he's the Yoda species and because he's a youngling, they're calling it yodeling, which, hey, it's the internet. So Baby Yoda, and this is something that is one of the things that one of our loyal listeners reached out about was, is it Yoda's kid, right? Because first of all, you talk about bringing the ladies to the table. First, this whole Mandalorian thing it's interesting because there are people who are not as, I guess, passionate Star Wars fans as you and I and others in our circles, who are not steeped in all of this, nerd lore, who have come to this show because they're also, they've signed up for the Disney for everything that it offers, and they're like, oh, I'll check this out. And people who are casual Star Wars fans or whatnot. So because it's not clearly stated, unless you've been reading the press material and you've been, and you're, again, a hardcore nerd like us, it's unclear to a lot of people what era this is in and who the Mandalorian is in relation to Boba Fett or whatever, and then they see Baby Yoda, which is the colloquial term because we still don't have a name for the species of Yoda, so we can't say that it's a young whatever. So we just have to call it Baby Yoda, which is fine. But there's people who are like, is it young Yoda? So is this like a prequel? Then people are like, well, is it Yoda's kid? And yeah, I mean, chronologically, yes, 50 years. 50 years. So this show is supposed to take place 5 years after the Battle of Endor. And 50 years would put this right at the birth of Anakin Skywalker. Okay. So at that point, you're talking about pre Empire, right? So the height of the Old Republic. Yoda would have been on the council, right?
So now, okay.
So then there was Waddle, right? Or what was
Yaddle.
it? Yaddle. Yeah, whatever. So in the background, there is a female Yoda species.
That doesn't show up past episode 1.
Right. Only in episode 1 and only briefly when they're showing like large, like pan and scan shots of the council. Doesn't have any speaking role or whatever, but so there are people who speculate that it's their child, but then there's the whole thing about attachment and all that crap and Yoda. Anyway, so the deal is this: it is a child of the Yoda species. We don't know yet if it's Yoda's actual offspring or not, but the timeline, the math on it works if they want to go that way.
Yeah, I mean, but
I hope it does.
If I do the math, if they say that this takes place approximately 4 years after the destruction of the second Death Star, and then you push it back another 5 years, so it's like, if you got to play loose and fast with the Star Wars. So let's just do a nice. Let me see, what would that be? So 4 years, and so that maybe 10 years before A New Hope, and then you push it back 20 because they've established it's 20 to 25. So you only have like 35, and then you go back 10 it's within 10 years or something like that. Because the only reason I'm trying to do the math is I'm trying to figure out would the restriction of trade cause a shortage of Yoda-sized prophylactics around the time Baby Yoda was like...
The taxation of trade routes. We no longer have access to birth control.
It's like, he's all of a sudden, Raw Dog, I will go. I don't know. It's just that kind of that idea that, Yoda, in a drunken or height of passion or whatever, he was like, let's just go for it kind of situation. Then we get Baby Yoda.
Rhythm method I will practice.
It's just like it would totally link up, considering how, like, fatherhood is, not particularly cherished in the Star Wars universe.
That's also true.
It's like that nobody's ever even given it. Basically, everyone's trying to save everybody's dad on this. It doesn't matter. Everybody's either the dad is trying to make up for some mistake they made, or somebody's trying to save their dad. It's like all the moms they're pretty much perfect in this. They either die because of broken hearts,
true,
or they just get a random shout out from their sons on the bridge of the Millennium Falcon because Ron Howard had to think up some reason to, I didn't know my dad, but I had the coolest mom. Me too.
Me too.
Well, Han, where was your mom then? It's like, I think her mom died or something, but it's my point is like, not to get on a tirade. And also, I'm trying to stick the landing about my Yoda prophylactic joke.
The only thing that's sticking is Yoda.
I honestly don't think there is any connection to Yoda. I mean,
I hope not.
I think that they are really trying to. Bob Iger has talked a lot about the issues of going forward of trying to keep Star Wars fresh without having it tied into that one, specific vein of the Luke, Obi-Wan, Han Solo, Leia, the droids, that kind of thing. Because I think they've quickly learned how limiting that can be, because they tried to use it as kindling to light the fire of people getting excited about the new characters, and all they ever did is just burned up their kindling.
That's true. Yeah.
They completely wasted the integrating of the new characters and the old. So now they're like, maybe we won't maybe if they even thought they like, well, maybe the second season we'll start doing a direct touch. Because I don't think you're going to see a lot of that. Because, I mean, if I'm speculating, as I always am, is that, the only way forward Lucasfilm has, I know they're going to make more Star Wars movies that are going to have no bearing, it's not going to involve anything that's come before, but they're always going to have to go back and make content that connects to the original saga, because they're going to quickly know it's like, okay, yes, there are going to be kids that are going to be like, Star Wars, the next generation. Yeah. I'm, so-and-so, and I do this, and my fist turns into a water fountain, and I can, bath toys or whatever.
Form of.
Yeah, it's just going to, whatever they're going to do to be like, get this figured out. But they eventually are going to quickly learn that they are always going to have to dip their toe back in to the Galactic Civil War, to the Clone Wars, to the Post, because there's 30 years of storytelling. And, from the guy that brought you Watch for Deep Fakes, that, if you see, you see these videos now where they, quickly throw, Arnold Schwarzenegger's face onto Bill Hader's body. And, within a couple, or they do a, Collider, you were talking about, has been doing this run where they get some guy throwing on a George Lucas wig and then they change his face. So it's like Tom Cruise and all these deep fakes having a conversation. And my point being is like the idea that they're going to probably throw, like a facial capture rig on Sebastian Stan in the next 5 years to have him start to play a post Return of the Jedi Luke. Because that they're going to quickly find that nobody's going to care about any of these characters that they created, not using any of the source material that doesn't exist according to Kathleen Kennedy. But she'll be gone by then. I mean,
she'll be dead.
She'll be 21. She'll be on a beach somewhere enjoying her life. So it's not a thing. She won't be spearheading this next thing, but
let's hope not.
They're going to do something and it's probably not going to connect with anybody, and they're going to freak out and they're going to say, well, what can we do to dip in? And they're going to start to either do TV things or movies that have to deal with the post end of, post second Death Star or Star Wars. And it's going to probably have a lot to do with doing like what they did with Tarkin. They're probably going to find somebody and they'll pay the stigma of, because, a couple years ago when Carrie Fisher died, they acted like we would never CGI her. It's like, well, you did it when she was,
They did the young version of it.
Yeah, when you were getting high, when she was getting high or whatever in England or whatever, it's like you were okay with that. She signed off on that. I mean, I don't even think she had to sign off on it. I think it was a thing.
I don't think she had to sign off on it, but I know that they did talk to her about it, and she said, "Yeah, go for it."
And then they made the big deal about her brothers. Oh, they will not be doing, or they will, or they won't, and they made this statement like, "We won't be creating her from whole cloth." It's as if somehow like reskinning like deleted footage is any better.
Right.
But whatever, because we're gonna get 8 minutes.
Whatever, skin job.
Yeah. So. But my point is that I know eventually they are going to do the CGI recasting of these movies. They're going to put digital masks on these actors, and we're going to see adventures either on Disney Plus on a small scale, or they're just going to do theatrical films. So it's kind of like they don't need to tie it in, because this can be its own separate thing. If people really need for it to get back to the Skywalkers, eventually that stuff's going to come up.
Well, I mean, it is tied in, but it's not overtly tied in, right? Like, we're in the universe, we're bouncing around, we're talking about events, right?
Right.
Oh, the Empire fell, and the Empire, the Emperor is dead, and there was Endor and whatever, but we don't have to go see how Luke feels about the Mandalorian, or we don't have to go see how, Princess Leia feels about, bounty hunting in the post-Empire era or whatever.
Right.
Like, we don't need to check in on those people. We don't care. In the context of what's going on in the Mandalorian's life, we don't care about whether or not Han Solo is being a good dad right now. Like, we don't care, right? It has nothing to do, has no bearing on the story that we're telling. And if it feels good for once that, everybody, I mean, there's part of it is carried through in the fan base, but it's like, for example, when Rey was introduced, everybody was like, oh my God, we got to find out who her parents are. And so, oh, I hope it's Obi-Wan. Oh, I hope it's Luke. Oh, I hope it's, and whatever. Yeah, people are wondering, where did Baby Yoda come from? But the level of obsessive fan theory on that is just not there like it is with, for example, Rey. Like,
yeah, I think it's either people are like just enjoying it for the ride, which I hope that's the way, or it's that weird thing where it's like, oh, there's fatigue and we just don't know it's fatigue yet, and people are like, because I mean, I guess that's how again, the fact that I'm really not spending a lot of time thinking about where this story is going, which is kind of different for me. The minute I get into, usually when I get into Star Wars, in my brain, it starts to speculate, starts to think about like, well, maybe this will connect to this. Maybe this is that. Maybe this is that. What is this? And again, for me not to do that, maybe that's just me, or maybe that's something about this, show that people are just like, yeah, I'm just going to take it as it's episodic, because not every episode builds to it's like not every episode you end with this greater understanding of the Star Wars universe. It's like you just know a little bit more about your character. That is the name of the show. It's like you don't know galactic politics. You don't really know much more,
Well, but again, these are all things that are referenced, but they're done. It's all done in an appropriate amount. Like the galactic politics in episode 1 was like it was an anvil around the neck of the story. Like, oh, I don't give a shit about trade routes, and I don't care about this crap. Yeah, I get it. It's part of setting up why the things are happening that are happening, but it's the most boring possible way to do it. We've had conversations in The Mandalorian about, Imperial credits aren't necessarily as valuable as they once were, right? Where we have issues with the intergalactic economy and how the fall of the Empire is impacting it, and then whether or not the New Republic is able to, fill the void with a valid currency. And then, they talk about just the things that have been going on in the universe, and it's done in an appropriate way where it feels like it's a natural part of the dialogue with the characters. Like you go in and sit down with Carl Weathers and you're like, hey man, I want to do a job and I want to get paid. And he's like, all right, well, here's your credits. And you're like, those aren't really that good anymore here. You've now made a comment about the current state of affairs in the universe, politically, economically, whatever. Like for example, when they say, well, if you don't like it, go back and talk to the New Republic and see what they're going to do for you. And then everybody's all chuckles about how that, again, making a comment about the efficacy of the New Republic and whether or not they're able to manage the universe and the core systems and all that stuff. These conversations are happening in a natural way between the characters, where that doesn't bog down, where you feel like the writers are trying to over-explain to the audience or to try and like educate you on what you've missed or whatever. And it's just something that it's a technique that I appreciate writers using, and it's one of the things that I've talked about when we've talked about Gibson or whatnot, is that the author or the writer is making the assumption that the audience is intelligent enough to pick up on the cues that they're giving, and that therefore you don't feel like you're being lectured by the characters, or you don't feel like people are over explaining. You just go, it feels more natural, the interactions that the characters are having, because it's like, oh hey Steve, oh hey Mike, fucking New Republic, they're a bunch of losers. Yeah, I know, it's crap, right? And then you keep going and you move on down the line and you deal with the story. You don't have to have an entire episode where they're talking about, well, and then I voted for Leia for Senate because I really liked her policy about, childcare in the schools. And I was like, I don't need that shit, dude. Just shut up. Kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you're right, because it does kind of give you the 2-minute tour of, and Cara Dune was kind of implying heavily that, she went from being a peacekeeper to a enforcer, working for the New Republic, and not liking that. And it was just like, oh, So, it's like meet the old new boss, same as the old boss kind of thing. And she's had to like make decisions about her future when she was probably assuming that things were just going to be better, which actually kind of sets up, because I think that's going to be another thing that Disney, if they're actually interested in creating a long-lasting story arc or whatever, or universe with their property, is that they are going to have to now retroactively go back and make sense of what's happened in the sequel trilogy of the rise of the First Order. It's like all of a sudden, they're not established as a real. I mean, they've done a little bit in the book, but we're not talking books. This established that all of a sudden that nobody really understood what a threat they were, except for Leia, until they destroyed Hosnian Prime and all this kind of idea. Like, where did they get their money? Who was Snoke? How did he get to, get this power that he's known across the galaxy or what? I actually don't. They don't I guess they don't. The only people that reference him are like Leia and Han, but. Yeah, they're just going to have to retroactively talk about the rise of the First Order, because I know they were using a lot of lip service of like, oh, well, the First Order is really just leftover remnants of the Empire. And it's kind of like the Nazis hiding in Argentina after the war kind of thing. But they've already they've had a little bit of that, but a lot of it seems to be of the idea that a lot of people maybe benefited from the Empire being in charge, and now those scales are being balanced, and it's not necessarily as cut and dry that all these people were feeling, quote, oppressed by the Empire. So it's like, that was one of the things about in the ancillary material before, was its idea of the whole idea of people like Han Solo and Lando Calrissian and Boba Fett and Jabba the Hutt. They all existed in this world because of this oppressive government, because it created a need for, bounty hunters or spice smugglers or scoundrels that want to take over administrative positions and be puppet proxies for the Empire, apparently, or, for mining operations. I don't know how. I actually don't know much about his day-to-day duties on Bespin. He might have bullshitted. You find out like later on, like, oh, I actually didn't know any of it. I was just bullshitting you that day. Yeah. I had actually been there only for 2 weeks. But, it's just, yeah, I mean, I feel like Star Wars benefits always best if you don't flesh it out completely, but then you don't just leave it all to chance.
Right.
And just hope, oh, well, people will get the idea that, like, they had this stripe on their pants and this means that. It's like, well, you need a little bit more than that. But you also don't need, a scroll. I mean, that's a nice thing about this episode, is that, a lot of the issues with, like, Star Wars video games, like, every time you started a new video game, there'd be, like, a scroll, a crawler telling you what's going on, and it got to be tedious. When you play the video game, you're like, I'm just gonna skip over this part of it.
Exactly.
And they opted not to do that, and only for the saga films, and I think that's smart that they didn't. They don't have to do a crawler. It's been 4 years since the destruction of Death Star 2, and trade rights and routes are in dispute
again.
Yeah. I was gonna
for the third time in this universe.
I was going to say, well, some stuff we haven't really covered to kind of wrap this up. What do you think of the music?
I enjoy it.
Okay.
I enjoy the theme song, or whatever you want to call it. The theme I like. Well, I find that the music that is in the episodes invokes to the comparisons to the Western and also to the samurai epic. The flavor, the tonal, composition of the music. You feel like you could very much either be watching a Kurosawa film or a Clint Eastwood movie. And it works for me. I know some people have complained that it's not John Williams, and that the Star Wars without a John Williams epic soundtrack, and it's like or John Williams inspired or whatever. Again, part of the appeal and part of the joy and excitement of this new show is that it's just different enough. It's different from everything that's come before. And I think that the music serves it really well. I know some people have complained about it. They feel it's too on, current year or whatever, but I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah, I mean, I there's parts of it I like and parts of it I don't. I do enjoy the more organic kind of woodwind reed instruments thing because it does kind of gets that idea of the otherness. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, I think it would be a total mistake to, because there was a little bit of this, some of the sequences, like when chapter 2, when the Mandalorian reassembles his ship and leaves and kind of waves at the whatever, and there's this heroic music, and I'm just like, ugh. It doesn't work for me. There's some, like, whenever they try to emulate John Williams on this, that's when I have the issue.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Because I think it's like, yeah, this guy, his name's Göransson, Ludwig Göransson. I guess he did some music he's worked with Marvel. He did the Black Panther soundtrack, I guess.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, if I had cast, if I had thought about, like, who would I want to do the music, there's nothing that bad about it. I mean, I guess maybe I wish they take some more chances in those moments when they use the heroic swell of the orchestral or whatever it is, because I don't know if it's a real orchestra or not. Mm-hmm. I assume at this level they're using something, but I don't know. But yeah, the heroic stuff doesn't kind of work for me. I mean, like, there's a lot of people out there like Mark Mothersbaugh and Bear McCreary that do kind of like this one-man band approach to television scoring. And they can use more kind of like some of the stuff. Mark Mothersbaugh did some of the music for Thor Ragnarok, which had some.
So did Led Zeppelin.
Yes. Which had some like synth wave kind of stuff, some analog synth stuff, but which is Mark Mothersbaugh he was the singer of Devo. So you'd expect that from him.
We on that band?
Yeah. And it's just, I kind of would like a little bit of that. I think that would be a great thing, kind of maybe the throwback to the 70s thing of like sci-fi movies that use analog synth. But I have a soft spot for that kind of thing, so maybe I'm just trying to shoehorn my own thing that I enjoy in there, because I remember, like, I didn't enjoy the DCU Aquaman movie, but there's parts of the score where they're integrated some of this kind of analog synth stuff, and I thought it worked really great. The whole rest of the score is just kind of like, eh. But those parts, some of it I think has to do with when they're underwater or something. But I don't know. I liked and I don't like this new score. I definitely haven't bothered to go and listen to it outside the context of the show, which is maybe might mean something. I think every episode is on either Spotify or Apple Music currently. Mm-hmm. It airs on Thursday night. I think Friday morning it pops up. So for people that have those services, you can go check it out. But yeah, I think it works for what it is. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's also not sticking out like a sore thumb. It's kind of, it's the part that I was like, some of it I can take or leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that each individual episode chapter kind of has its own flavor with the music, and some of them, like you say, have been better than others. But when the theme song, again, that they play during the credits mostly, but then also when they do flash the logo, I found it. I really enjoy that, and I've listened to it outside of the show, and I found a guy who did a really fantastic classical guitar rendition of it I was listening to the other day. And, again, it's growing on me. I like it.
Yeah, I might have to try just doing some, like, go on and get the Apple Music and just do it solo. Because, I mean, really, it's kind of like, if it can work on its own, then my estimation kind of goes up of these things. It's... Star Wars for me is so much about the music, and when Absolutely. It works. And unfortunately, lately, sometimes it doesn't work. I keep thinking about, not really John Williams, I think about one of the big turds in the sequel trilogy is that crappy music in, what's it called? Maz Kanata's thing, the one that Lin-Manuel Miranda made, was like they call
Jabba Flow.
Yeah, I hate that.
Really?
Fucking hate that thing.
I'm sorry.
It's just something about, there's something so like high school orchestra kind of like, oh, isn't it cool? We got the guy from Hamilton to do a Star Wars thing, and it's like, I don't know. What I loved about the original Cantina music is that it touched on something of the idea of the more simple time of like, the music is like, I don't know, is this the kind of music my grandparents liked? But the instrumentation was electronic, so it was like felt new and old at the same time. Mm-hmm. You literally felt like you were hearing something kind of new for the first time. And
jizz.
Yeah, jizz wailing.
Jizz wailing, baby.
And but the problem with that Jabba Flow thing, it literally was like, hey, what's the hottest ticket in town right now? Oh, Hamilton. Let's get that guy to put some music in this movie so we have another reason to get non-Star Wars fans to come see it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I thought it was fun.
Okay.
I mean, I enjoyed it. Like,
horses for courses.
Horses for courses, bitches. So it has a very reggae feel to it, and it's reggae from a galaxy far, far away. And for what it is, it's fine. It's a brief musical interlude. It's something just like the original Cantina music, and sadly, the Sice Noodles Band and the Ewoks song. But anyway, it's something outside of the John Williams score that it's a contrasting piece of music that ties you into the scene, right? And that's fine. I did think it was kind of fun, though, that, it was kind of reggae-ish. But, to your point, and I see this a lot with of what currently is going on at Lucasfilm and Disney and pretty much all of society, is that everything is a very cynical cash grab. And like you say, if they had just made a reggae song for the bar from Maz Kanata's Castle, that would have been fine. But then you have to take it to that next level of cynical, like, how are we going to get people to come watch this movie? And then you go grab the Hamilton guy and you have him come in and do the music or whatever.
Yeah, and it's that thing where it's like it ties it to this time again. I know it's like most people aren't going to be like, man, you're reading way too much into it. And I'm sitting in a base.
Probably.
Yeah, we're just past the 3-hour mark. Yeah, we're reading a little bit into it. Yeah. So if you're here too, we're all in the same bathtub, baby.
That's right.
Scrub my back.
That's right.
But if I really get into it,
it's hot.
It's the thing. It's the literal thing.
So
like
hot.
It's like the fact that like how distracting it is that Bobby Brown shows up in Ghostbusters 2, because Bobby Brown was super popular.
Right.
And it's like nothing against Bobby Brown, but it's like, I don't know, maybe that's because it's not its own. Ghostbusters really wasn't its own kind of thing. It's not as like specialized as Star Wars. But if it was that thing where it's all of a sudden, you got to have whoever was hot in that year is in the movie. And that's kind of what bugs me, is that like Star Wars is supposed to be timeless. And that's why people talk funny in Star Wars, because, oops, sorry, I'm punching mics. But I'm so mad.
Punched him in the mic.
Punched the mic. It's supposed to be timeless, and Disney has this weird thing about
their very current year.
Why did it have to be so? I mean, like the guy that created the company literally created a land to recreate this idea in his head of a town that he lived in for 2 years when he was a child. So it's like this idea of like the fantasy is better than the reality is the number one thing about when Disney creates something. I mean, I think that's the Disney magic. It creates what you had in your head, not what you actually did. It's not that summer barbecue that you actually went to where your dad screamed about, why did you buy these cheap ass hot dogs? It's you have this memory of your like the lake and people are in canoes and the ice cream is so sweet and the fireworks sizzle in the sky.
Right.
They sell you the fantasy. It's like, quit reminding me of what's going on in the real world.
Exactly.
Don't put any Backstreet Boys or Heads of State or James Bonds or the redheaded comb-over English singer guy with all the bad tattoos. Oh, what's his name? I can't remember his name. I'm old. I don't know who's popular anymore. I want to say Russ, but his name's not Russ.
Oof. Okay.
He's got red hair and bad tattoos.
Really?
You guys all know who I'm talking about, but he's apparently a stormtrooper in the new Star Wars movie.
Oh, great.
And it's,
well, at least he gets
you
to wear
won't
a helmet.
see him, but it's like, they threw in Tom Hardy, which his scenes got cut in Last Jedi. Stop doing that. Stop trying to make Star Wars current year. I've said this before, so I guess I'm belaboring this, but my point is that Lin-Manuel Miranda, I want to say Manuel Noriega. Every time I apologize to Lin-Manuel Miranda, I do not think of you as Manuel Noriega. It's just I have a weird thing. My tongue is weird. But it's not even against him. It's just he's so current year. He could be in the movie as long as he wasn't making the music for the movie. It just threw me off. Anyway, but that has nothing to do with the guy that makes the music for The Mandalorian. It's all right. It's not keeping me up at night. Not like that Hamilton guy did. Like, why did he have to suck so much? Anyway, I think I'm starting to get punchy. I think now is the time to wrap this up.
Yeah. So before we go,
yes,
the two things that were conversation pieces with some of our listeners. One is, who is the caped mystery character at the end of Chapter 5?
Okay.
And then the other thing is, how are we going to address the Baby Yoda situation? Like, so the first season, if you read the synopses, spoiler alert, the first season ends with a confrontation between the Mandalorian and some long-lost enemy or long-time enemy. So we don't know if that's a person we've already met yet in the show. We don't know what that all means, but the question is the Baby Yoda situation. How does that carry forward into the second season? How do we resolve this? And it's probably all tied together, the Baby Yoda and the mystery person. And so there's also the wrinkle that Chapter 7 is being released 3 days early or 2 days early because of the premiere of Rise of Skywalker, and the reason why they're doing that is because there's a tie-in to the Rise of Skywalker.
Weird.
Yeah. And so the speculation, on all that is Jeff, CEO of Lounge East, he and I were talking the other day, and he brought up an excellent point that it could be the bounty hunter lady that looks like from in the Rise of Skywalker with the
Zori Bliss,
the gold helmet or whatever, the one that looks like she's in Daft Punk. Yeah. Around the world. So his speculation was that she's going to show up in that episode and be the tie-in, which makes perfect sense because, otherwise, who else? We're going to get Snoke?
Yeah, it's a good way to give her it's a good way to give her a backstory that means that they won't have to dispense with it in the movie.
Yeah.
It'd be the first time that they kind of if she's the kind of picks up the narrative space of the movie as a Boba Fett or the Zam Wessel character, just the kind of the mysterious bounty hunter that, go to your comic book shop and find out the story that we're not going to establish in the movie. This might be if they do that would be the first time that they ever actually thought, hey, maybe we should actually give this, because I think that that's a good idea, that they could introduce these characters using, that when the movie ends up like, I just wish I knew a little bit more about that character going in. I always wonder, why don't they do little teasers for movies, not necessarily Star Wars movies, but even Marvel movies. They do those weird little 10-minute things they put on the DVDs.
Right.
It's like they could do things like that where like, hey, this character, it's only going to expand the experience if we put out this short film, or this way they can do that by putting it in the TV show, and that way you get all that information. And for people that care about it, like us, that want to kind of get a wide breadth of an idea, and it won't jam it up for people that like, I just want to go and see the goddamn movie. Don't tell me I need to see 15 fucking things to understand what you're telling me here. You could kind of do it both ways if you did it that way. You get the extra context for the nerds, and then you get, the way they've always done it, where they just kind of throw you in and go, all right, new character, she's shiny.
Shiny girl.
And she'll either be a huge part of the story, or she'll get her hand chopped off and get a Camino saber dart to the neck. I mean, there is the outlier that, okay, my theory is that's just the Bill Burr bounty hunter character that has the little gun on his shoulder that they showed in the thing, and that's all. It's just going to be Bill Burr. But I'm going to give you my outlier thing that they might do.
Okay.
Because they shocked us with the Yoda. Will there be a second shocker? They could shock us with Boba Fett. They could bring him back. I mean, they could initially... Boba Fett has tried to come back in the official canon several times. Before George decided he loved money more than Star Wars. That's that's not fair. It's fair. No, when George was afraid that his knuckleheaded kids would get a hold of his golden goose, I guess, and he sold it. They had that Star Wars 1313, which was going to be, had been deep in development, and then George says, "Yeah, make the protagonist Boba Fett." He's like, "You do understand we have to remake the game." Whatever. And then he sold it, and then the game never got made. Well, then there was the Josh Trank Boba Fett movie, which they know it was a Boba Fett movie, and then they tanked the Trank.
Tank.
They tanked the Trank. He was a disaster. We hired him to do a movie. He was absolutely. We just had to tank the Trank. He was terrible. I would not even be in this movie. Sorry. I don't know why. I apologize. Sorry, JR. But it's, the thing is that...
Well, he's hosed by now.
Yeah, he's hosed by now. But
all the funny voices.
And then third, this Mandalorian TV show was supposed to be Boba Fett. That's the rumor mill said, and then they decided they didn't want to do it. They wanted to try something new. They didn't want to tie in, and then they created this As-4 has not been named yet. It's just Mando or Mandalorian. And that way it just kind of, like, there's actually no version. You could just say, like, Boba Fett, and it wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. I'm not saying the Mandalorian is Boba Fett. I'm just saying that
Boba Fett.
They could bring Boba Fett back in and then have it be a thing. It might actually ruin the thing. I don't know if they should do it. I'm just saying it's a possibility they could come in and throw this Boba Fett thing, and it would be something no one except for me would be expecting.
True.
Because they did raise the stakes. George was very protective of this Yoda race and didn't actually have it be a big part of the thing. And I think he even regretted in retrospect adding the Yaddle character to it, because in other movies he pulled her off the council and never referred to her in ancillary material ever again.
Right.
I think it was a thing where he was like, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, because he had talked about how Yoda was, this very unique character and very singular, and his role as the elder Jedi, elder statesman, whatever. And he wanted to preserve that and keep it. And that's why we have these lavish backstories for the Wookiees and for everybody else, and but we don't have it for Yoda. And like you say, I don't know if it's going to stay that way or not, but we've already, so this is the third one now. So obviously Yoda's uniqueness is diminishing, but does it, I guess the question is does the Baby Yoda character in this show serve to elevate and to preserve, the Yoda and the Yoda species, I guess, singularity or gravitas in the course of the story or not.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like if I'm not mistaken, I think I remember reading at one of these stories that technically the Yaddle character is dead, and it died on a mission, and that's why it's not on the council anymore. So if you think about it, that's the only one of that race, because Yoda's gone. He hasn't even figured out how to master lightning yet, I guess.
Right.
But so I don't know. It is the most unique one because I think the other ones are dead.
True.
But I really don't know if that race has a destiny that's like, it's like, are they all natural force? Are all people of that race force users? And that's why they go after them to drain whatever it's. I didn't.
Well, because there's all that talk about like extracting the material and all
the
stuff.
force juice or whatever.
Well, that sounds gross. I'm vaping that force juice.
No more flavored force vape juices.
I got bubble lung from the force juice.
You got popcorn lung, kid.
But the thing is, like, maybe, I don't know. Their race clearly are very powerful force users. I don't know if it could. I mean, I don't know. But they're doing this. They're doing this conversation of the reason why, Herzog wanted the Baby Yoda in the first place was that they were going to do some experimentation on the Baby Yoda.
I'm trying to get it to resurrect Klaus Kinski. I need to have him be my Grand Moff Klaus Kinski.
But there's an interesting point to that. If you look at the doctor guy, that the Mando, freaks out or whatever, the guy with the glasses or whatever, that's working for Herzog. He has the Camino cloner symbol on his uniform.
Oh, he does, doesn't he?
Yeah. So remember the patch that all the clones were wearing when they were eating and doing all stuff? It's sort of almost like a shield shape, white, and it has like these two red, squiggles in it or whatever. He has that exact same thing on his jumpsuit.
Wow.
And so he has a little patch too. And then of course there's this side conversation about, have you extracted the material yet? And I'm like, I could kill him. I don't care. Just do it. So I don't know if they're trying to extract genetic material and try and create something different, or if they're trying to clone more Yodas, but I don't know what the purpose of that would be. But clearly there's something that's worthy of the scientific pursuit of this particular guy. But my other thing is, why is everybody trying to kill it? Yeah. So it's like Herzog and the guys really wanted Baby Yoda alive, but there's like 50 bounty hunters who are out trying to kill it at the same time. And so there's an interesting...
the Herzog character did say something like, he did add the caveat that if you couldn't secure the thing, you could kill it. And then the doctor freaks out and goes, I'm being realistic or something like that. It was kind of like, because it might go bad.
Right. Or it could become another boon to the New Republic.
Right.
Because, like Herzog, I think his character is going to ultimately pave the way for the conversation about the First Order.
Yeah.
And there's been some material, some promotional material put out there where there is a character who is going to appear in this show who has been in the comic book already. It was in the Poe Dameron comic.
Oh.
And he's one of the guys who was an Imperial, and he winds up becoming a key player in developing the First Order.
Okay, I think I remember who.
He's got a little pencil mustache.
Yeah.
So I've seen some promo images of someone who looks very much like him. So I mean, we may get a larger conversation. We might or more information as we go forward, talking about the First Order and maybe why. I mean, who knows? Maybe they're looking for that material so they can fix Snoke's face.
Yeah,
I have no idea, but
yeah, it could be anything. It could be.
Who knows? But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I want to know more about what Herzog and his people do, why they're there, what's going on, why he doesn't make his stormtroopers shine their armor. Come on, people, we have standards.
We've let discipline kind of slip.
Exactly. Things have gotten very soft around here. But yeah, there's that. And then again, trying to figure out who the mystery character is at the end. I have no idea. I thought maybe it was going to be, Carl Weathers, but there's so many other, possibilities, like you say. I mean, there's always the shot of there's going to be some big surprise introduction of somebody from the past. And then the other thing is the how do we deal with the Baby Yoda going forward? Because is it going to be his companion for every episode going forward? Because we've created a situation with the fan base where people who are not necessarily, like you say, we were joking earlier about how do you get the ladies to watch Star Wars? Oh, Baby Yoda. But there's a lot of people who are really invested in this character, and I think that the character of Baby Yoda has sort of hit Disney and Lucasfilm kind of sideways, like they weren't anticipating.
Yeah, they didn't have any. They claim that we didn't have any toys ready because we were thinking that we didn't want to ruin the surprise. But
I would buy that, but I don't buy that. I mean, that's an excellent point, because if you're going to say, "Oh, we're going to do this show, and it's going to be on our streaming service," and and there's going to be a Yoda, like that might have turned off a lot of people, because outside of any context, you're like, "Oh, we're gonna have a Baby Yoda," and people are like, "Oh, Jesus, here
it's
we
Muppet
go, Disney."
Babies. No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Star Wars babies, which is
Totally.
essentially what they've done. But
Right, but also the other thing though is, I don't know if you can't. I don't know. I don't understand how Disney, a corporation built on creating children's characters and children's programming and marketing the shit out of children's stuff to children, doesn't anticipate that a cute little green baby thing is going to be popular with kids and ladies, right? But there is a 10-inch coming from Funko in the next couple of weeks. So
yeah, I think that what they're trying to do is like they're concerned with things of like trying to make John Boyega smaller on the Chinese market Star Wars maps, but
Jesus.
Star Wars posters. But that's. But I'm drinking my Kermit the Frog tea. But that's just,
right. That's
but
just
that's
me
just,
over here.
But
right?
that's just me over here.
Nice.
Corporate bastards.
Yeah.
All right. I think we should wrap that up.
All righty, my friend.
If you have questions, concerns, hosts at talkingbirdcast.com. I'm only going to say it once.
Hosts.
Just remember it. Also, we are delving into the realm of our first merch release. We got a T-shirt up. Well, actually, you can get a sticker. It's like it's on TeePublic, and I will have the links in the show notes. And when it gets up, the design should be on sale, because when the new design comes up, it's like 30% off. So you can get a shirt for like $13, and it's a nice way. I call it an understated celebration of the Two Dudes podcast. And if you agree. If you don't like the shirt, get it put on a mug or something.
Get a sticker.
Yeah,
get a phone case.
Get something for a friend.
That's right.
If you want something different, hosts at Talking. I guess I'll say it twice. Hosts at Talking Birdcast, and maybe I can throw something together. But it'll be in the show notes, or you can go on tpublic.com and search. It'll be under the store. We're doing a partnership. I know the guy that runs this store, and he's cool. He's let me put up some designs. You go to TeePublic and you search PIZZWIZZLER, Piz Whizzler. And you can find shirt. You can find other designs. Some of them are Star Wars inspired, but by that time the Two Dudes shirt should be on the store for your purchase. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not at this time, my friend.
Right.
I'm just fired up for the finale of this show.
Of the Skywalker saga?
No, of the show. And then I'm also going to attend the finale of the Skywalker saga. And
I haven't bought tickets yet. I need to buy tickets.
I have tickets for after Christmas.
Oh. Ooh.
So really quickly, this will be the first time since the prequels came in. Because obviously when we were 5 and 7,
right,
whatever,
right.
we weren't staying on the sidewalk at midnight to see anyway. So the first time since episode 1 came out that I have not attended a premiere or a midnight showing.
I'm gonna jump in there and say, I bet you anything it's been the first time since the special editions that you didn't go the first night. Am I right?
Yeah, special.
So it was 97. So 2 years.
97. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So it's the first time since 97 that I haven't gone to the midnight or the premiere show.
Unfortunately, that'll be. Well, I mean, I guess I didn't go. I went the first weekend on a Sunday to see Solo, so I didn't go the first night for that either. But yeah, it's kind of like.
Well, and again, just to self-reference here, but this speaks to the problems that Disney and Star Wars are having with the fan base because. Since episode 7, I've been going and doing it with the 501st and doing the troops and going up to Cinerama and doing things like that for all of them, and there's less and less demand for it. Cinerama wasn't even going to have the 501st at this one until very last minute. Like they finally just said. It was really up to a couple of weeks ago where they said, oh, okay, we're going to do a thing and have the 501st show up for the premiere because when over the previous months or the previous releases, they would have it months in advance. They would, they would have, roster spots and everything. So it's interesting to see how it's all constricting and tightening, because the fans aren't showing up for those premiere nights. So they're not going to invest in having all the, the eye candy there in Stormtrooper outfits. So anyway, we'll have tickets, or I have tickets for after Christmas. My brother and my nephew, our tradition, we're going to finish strong. And then, fear not, people, we will have a recap episode for you.
We'll have a review, obviously, after we see it. I mean, I'm not making a promise of a date because it's hard. And I'm not going to promise I'm going to see it twice.
Ooh,
I always see them twice usually. I don't think I saw Solo twice. I think I saw that once. So I don't make a promise of seeing it twice. So you might just get my first. If I like it, I'll see it. But if I don't, I won't.
You get the gut reaction hot take.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys are really worried about that, but I am.
I know I am. So yeah, we'll have more future Star Wars content.
Please like and subscribe.
Hit the bell for notifications. Yes.
Smash that like button. We are on YouTube and you can subscribe there. But anyway,
shirts,
talkingbirdcast.com. I'll put a link up there too. Thanks for listening. And I guess that force, I still may wish it be with you. No?
Always.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Always.
Guten Tag.